was.
This is Audible.
Hachette Audio presents The Daily Show with Jon Stewart presents Earth, the Audiobook, with Jon Stewart, the correspondents of The Daily Show, and me, Sigourney Weaver. To our alien listeners,
Greetings, alien brethren! Across eons of time, we extend our hands in posthumous friendship and bid you welcome to planet Earth on behalf of not only ourselves, but the entire Viacom family. Sorry we're not here to greet you in person. Really, really sorry. I mean, we invited you over, you traveled who knows how many light years to see us, and you finally got here, and we're not home. And we never will be. And we left the place a mess. Now, trust us when we say, this was not our intention. In fact, we'd always assumed that we would be the ones gallivanting around the universe, rummaging through the remains of once great alien civilizations, wearing form-fitting space spandex, and perhaps solving cosmic mysteries. Que sera, sera. Ironically, your arrival would have been a profoundly life-changing moment for our race. We always wondered whether we were alone in the universe. To meet, befriend, and experience life through the, let's say, eyes of another intelligent being would have made all 6.8 billion of us feel less alone. And the knowledge that we were only one of untold numbers of sentient creatures in the cosmos might have finally given us the perspective we needed to rein in our self-destructive tendencies and work together for the greater good of our species and our planet. Especially if you'd come to kill us. Nothing would have united us as a species like the perceived existential threat posed by y'all. Not that we had any reason to assume your intentions in coming here were anything but honorable. It's just that in general, our own first-time interactions had a certain killing each other feeling out period. Of course, there were those who believed you had already visited our planet surreptitiously, an advanced race traveling trillions of miles across the Milky Way for the sole purpose of surprising and perhaps anally probing one of our rural denizens, which, as it happens, was the orifice least likely to yield useful pedagogical results. These humans also believed our governments, known mostly for bureaucratic incompetence, had somehow made your alien presence the one thing they could keep masterfully secret. Well, we don't blame you. Truth be told, we thought about you a lot. We created thousands of fictional extraterrestrials in our day, most of them slight variations on the theme of us. Us with bigger heads, us as full-grown fetuses, us with animal or fish parts, really hot lady us's, just like a piece of metal shit on their heads to make them look spacey. Of course, we had no idea what you actually looked like. Indeed, it is entirely possible you've entirely transcended materiality, that you're incorporeal spirits floating through the vacuum of space, in which case, mazel tov. Ah, that we were still alive, that we could see you as you really are, talk to you, learn from you, and then perhaps take you to one of our cinemas. We'll have more on those later. Share a laugh together, watching Men in Black, or cry together watching E.T., or feel incredibly awkward together watching Independence Day, or Aliens, or Species, or Cloverfield. We fought you guys a lot in our movies. But alas, we're dead. That will never happen. But this audiobook is designed to provide you with the next best thing to our actual presence, a comprehensive history of our planet and our species, conveniently written in the universal language, American English. Consider it a user's guide to our planet. Once you've discovered everything there is to know about us, as you will over a few hours, you might even begin to wonder what it would have been like to meet us. If so, feel free to splurge and genetically reconstitute the human race. As you'll hear, you'll find a wide selection of our DNA stored in 2 convenient locations, Svalbard in Norway and Trementina, New Mexico. Or just poke around. There's probably a thin layer of us on almost everything. But for now, take a load off. Position your, let's say, lower extremities comfortably on one of our many level surfaces. And relax. We think you're going to like it here. We sure did. Once.
Did you get our messages?
We tried to contact you for a long time. Not sure which, if any, of our messages you received, but taken collectively, they tell a sad tale of unrequited obsession.
The Pioneer Plaque, 1973.
Our first attempt to introduce ourselves was a pair of gold anodized aluminum plaques we sent into deep space. If you found it, you probably need some help on the symbols. The bra at the top there is the transition of hydrogen. The asterisk thingy is the map you were supposed to use to get here, and the couple there on the right, as naked as they are, was our way of asking you guys if you swing. What can we say? It was the 70s.
The Arecibo Message, 1974.
So we hadn't heard back from you by the following year, so we took a different approach. 3-minute broadcast of 1,679 frequency-modulated zeros and ones that had all the graphic sophistication of a light-bright picture. Lame, we know, but to be fair, this was about the coolest thing we could make computers do in 1974. That was the same year we put out a digital game that was nothing but 2 oscillating line segments and a dot. We called it Pong. It was huge.
The Voyager Golden Record, 1977.
3 years had passed, and, nothing. Nada. Not a word. So we did what desperate suitors do. We made you a mixtape. This gold record, actually, gold-plated. We didn't want you to think we'd spend too much on it. Contains Earth sounds, it's greetings in 55 languages, and a broad selection of terrestrial music. Liner notes were provided by Jimmy Carter, one of our most accomplished failures, and Kurt Waldheim, one of our least culpable Nazi war criminals.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977.
Later that year, in one last desperate, stalker-esque move, hundreds of U.S. government officials gathered in secrecy in northeastern Wyoming to play a 5-tone musical sequence they hoped would serve as your beacon of welcome. In a dry run filmed for posterity, hundreds of children dressed as long-necked, translucent creatures mingled freely with the officials, who also included a civilian Academy Award winner, Richard Dreyfuss. But real aliens never came, and to justify the ridiculous cost, we repurposed the footage into a phenomenally successful film.
Radio Transmissions, 1999 to 2010.
For the next 22 years, we left you alone. Figured you needed your space, i.e., space. Then the old hits came back. So using a new generation of radio transmitters, we started drunk dialing the universe. Ostensibly, the messages were about prime numbers and atomic structures, but the real message was, hey man, come over. It's late and we've got weed.
To our human listeners.
All right, people, listen up. In the words of the great human-machine hybrid Arnold Schwarzenegger,
come with me if you want to live.
It's pretty clear we as a species are not long for this world. Even the Mayans thought we weren't getting past 2012, and the Mayans were never wrong about anything. Well, they might have missed some signs concerning Cortez and their own demise, but that's not important right now. What's important is that any extraterrestrial race smart enough to get here, decipher this audiobook, and get some of its more obscure pop culture references will be fully capable of replicating life from nothing more than a strand of DNA. So gather round, pull out a hair, and let's do this. All right, at the end of this audiobook, go to Earth the Book, the website. There you're going to find a form with a number of questions pertaining to your suitability for future genetic reconstitution by aliens. When you've completed the form, you'll send it to one of the 2 collection facilities that we've chosen to indefinitely safeguard this precious paperwork. Now, the first of these is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This tightly regulated facility is located on the Norwegian island of Spitsbergen, named for Scandinavian music legend Bruce Spitsbergen. It stores 1.5 million distinct seed samples representing many of the world's thousands of species and subspecies of cultivated crops. It's a final safeguard against global agricultural catastrophe. half of the genetic reconstitution applications will be stored here. Hopefully the aliens will know the difference between human beings and zucchini seeds. Accordingly, we ask would-be reconstituents whose last names start with A through L to send their forms to
Svalbard Global Seed Vault, Akersgata 59 R5, Svalbard, Norway 9170. Attention, Olav Kierstad, Project Administrator.
The second location is the Trementina Base in Trementina, New Mexico. This is where the Church of Scientology stores the writings and lectures of its founder, L. Ron Hubbard, on engraved stainless steel tablets encased in titanium capsules in a huge labyrinth of tunnels built into a mountainside, etched with an enormous design meant to mark the return point for deceased church members coming back from their intergalactic travels. I know. The other half of the GRAs will be stored here. Hopefully the aliens will know the difference between human beings and, well, Scientologists. Accordingly, we ask applicants whose last names start with M through Z to send their forms to
Trementina Base, 37, ultra-secret but totally real Scientology Mountain Base Avenue, Trementina, New Mexico, 88439. Attention, David Miscavige, Project Administrator.
Now, if all goes according to plan, at some point in the future, you will find yourself, or someone very much like yourself, emerging from what we presume will be a gooey pod, alongside thousands of other people who bought this audiobook to give themselves something to listen to while they were in the bathroom. And then once again, we, humankind, will rule the world. By the way, try not to mention this last part to the you-know-whos.
Chapter 1. Earth.
The first thing you may have noticed on your way in was the color. Deep pools of greens and blues, unique within our galaxy, beckon amongst ethereal swirls of white clouds. As you get closer, you're struck by the topographical diversity. Vast oceans give way to lush green forests and jungles, which seamlessly taper off into sandy desert ridges, stretching towards meticulously water-carved canyons. In the distance, snow-covered mountains rise up to seemingly touch the sky. Of course, for an oblate spheroid, she's certainly not perfect. But despite a pronounced equatorial bulge and receding polar ice lines, she still stubbornly maintains a jaunty 23.4 degree axial tilt that does belie her 4.5 billion years. And she has been through it. We knew her as a fertile oasis of sophisticated life in the endless, barren expanse of the universe. No offense. But she was almost 20 million years old before she had even electrostatically accreted enough to achieve solid status, and even then, it was made up of mostly gases and dust the sun was throwing out anyway. But somehow, using nothing more than a little moxie and massive gravitational and magnetic fields, she pulled herself together. With an unassuming iron core and delicate silica crust, you would never suspect that much of her success was due to explosive volcanic eruption and the water she'd stolen from passing asteroids and trans-Neptunian objects in her wilder youth. She did what she had to. In her 4.5 billion years, she has been alternately covered in lava, ice, and ammonia. She's endured the endless discomfort of her tectonic plates shifting. She's seen her dedication to creating a viable atmosphere rewarded with a Cambrian explosion of multicellular creatures, only to witness 5 mass extinctions. I assume you came right after the 6th. She has survived being simultaneously pelted by all manner of asteroids, meteors, radiation, and whatever else decided to smash into her as they joyrode around the universe, and she did it all without complaint, unless you consider the violent restructuring of land masses through earthquakes complaining. It's funny. When we were alive, we spent much of our time staring up at the cosmos and wondering what was out there. We were obsessed with the moon and whether we could one day visit it. The day we finally walked on the moon was celebrated worldwide as perhaps man's greatest achievement. But it was while we were there, gathering rocks from the moon's desolate landscape, that we looked up. and we caught a glimpse of just how incredible our own planet was. Its singular, astonishing beauty. We called her Mother Earth because she gave birth to us. And then we sucked her dry. So welcome to Earth. Population U.
Location.
For most of our history, we had grave misconceptions about exactly where Earth stood within the cosmos. Due to scientific limitations and, more than a touch of narcissism, we believed everything in the universe literally revolved around us. There was a theory called geocentrism, which was originally egocentrism. But they spelled it wrong.
The neighborhood.
Our solar system consists of a sun, 8 planets, 170 or so moons, millions of asteroids, trillions of ice balls, and one dwarf trans-Neptunian object that tried to put one over on us. I'm looking at you, Pluto. Our observation of the planet's regular motion was the first triumph of empirical science over irrational dogma. Of course, we did name them after gods, just to be safe.
The sun.
What were you looking for, a red giant? Some flashy pulsar? Sorry if our plain yellow G-type main sequence star disappoints you, but she got the job done, and we liked her just fine.
Mercury.
The planet closest to the sun, referred to by realtors as solar adjacent.
Venus.
The solar system's femme fatale, flashy, alluring, and named for love. But don't get too close, or she'll crush you.
Earth.
Not the biggest, not the smallest, not the closest, not the farthest, but it's got something no other planet has, a marginally profitable publishing industry.
Mars.
This is where we thought you might come from. Probably our best friend in the solar system. We always meant to visit in person, but you know how it is.
Jupiter.
The biggest planet. Tread lightly. That great red spot, it's got herpes.
Saturn.
God liked this planet, so he put a ring on it.
Uranus.
This is the funniest planet by far, but you'll have to spend about 10 years learning idiomatic English to learn why.
Neptune.
Leaving? This is your last planet for 50 billion miles, so be sure to refill on methane.
Pluto.
This is that dwarf trans-Neptunian object we were telling you about.
Oceans.
These vast saltwater bodies covered over 70% of the surface of our planet, and would be a great place to live if you're lucky enough to have gills or a blowhole. We had neither. No, we struck a fair bargain with the oceans. They would let us live and play alongside them, sail and trade on top of them, and feast ourselves on the seemingly endless bounty fished out of them, and in exchange we would dump a jaw-dropping amount of shit into them. We referred to this as a win-win.
Continents.
The 30% of our planet that was not covered in water was called dry land, and this is where we preferred to spend most of our time. For the most part, the dry land was separated into 7 continents, ranging widely in climate, topography, and intrinsic worth. Let's start with the best.
North America.
Nickname? The land mass that kicks land ass. North America was Earth's newest continent, formed, I believe, in 1492. Blessed with abundant fresh water and fertile soil, it was settled remarkably quickly, thanks to the extermination of one race, the enslavement of a second, and the can-do attitude of a third.
Habitats. Grasslands.
Grasslands, areas that receive moderate amounts of rain, are dominated by low-lying vegetation, are easily the most mowable of the major habitats. What we got from them: grass, land. What to look for: abandoned lassos, bison carcasses, sweeping vistas of nothingness. What to eat: anything that moves, or better yet, has recently stopped moving. Surprising fact: grasslands were the only habitat without any surprising facts.
Landforms. Peninsulas.
Latin for penis-esque. Peninsulas were projections of land surrounded by water on three sides. The peninsula known as Florida was so suggestively shaped, it was banned from its own textbooks.
Places to see. Banff.
One of the most beautiful places known to man.
Places to avoid. Greenland.
Land? Yes. Green? Not so much.
South America.
Nickname El Pollo Loco. The poor man's North America, literally. South America was a land of flourishing jungles, stunning mountains, and vibrant coups. It stretched from the Amazon basin, a logger's paradise, to Patagonia, a cold and barren region home to the world's largest indigenous population of backpackers. South America consisted of 13 countries, 12 were Spanish-speaking, and the other covered its ass cheeks with a tiny piece of string.
Habitats. Tropical rainforests.
Home to over 80% of all species, rainforests were full of colorful plants, unusual animals, and insects that bite you then defecate in the wound. Invaluable to our planet's health, we discovered their true environmental importance just in time to be too late to save them. What we got from them: 25% of our medicines, 30% of our air, 50% of our benefit concerts. What to look for: unique exotic creatures not seen anywhere else on Earth. What to eat: unique exotic creatures not seen anywhere else on Earth. Surprising fact: though rich in biodiversity, rainforest nations were usually poor in money.
Landforms. Rivers.
Rivers were lakes with ambition. These flowing bodies of water were vital to our planet, supporting abundant freshwater life and providing the underpinning for the $50 billion a year steamboat poker industry.
Places to see. Rio de Janeiro.
Because how better to enjoy Carnival than under the watchful eye of a 130-foot Jesus?
Places to see. Lake Titicaca.
The Uranus of lakes.
Europe.
Nickname the Fertile Croissant. The western tip of Eurasia, Europe was accorded continent status only because the people who accorded continent status to landmasses lived there. This relatively small landmass produced numerous great empires, countless works of architectural and artistic genius, the world's finest cuisines, and an impressive 2 more world wars than any other continent. By the way, quick tip. Is your species hated? Sewing a Canadian flag to your backpack can often smooth your journey.
Habitats. Temperate forests.
Compared to the uncivilized debauchery of their tropical cousins, the temperate forests of Europe and North America were a model of self-control, order, and a strong Protestant work ethic. Every fall, the deciduous trees of these regions considerately condemn trillions of their own leaves to death solely to provide us with brief visual amusement. What we got from them: floors, cabinetry, maple syrup, sites and material for second homes. What to look for: either individual trees or the entire forest, depending on the broadness of your worldview. What to eat: gingerbread houses, bluebirds of happiness, Bambi.
Places to see. Iceland.
A land of spectacular scenery and even more spectacular bankruptcy.
Places to see. Paris.
Breathtakingly beautiful and romantic, especially now that there are no Parisians to ruin it.
Places to see. Mykonos.
Nowhere on Earth would have been more receptive to your anal probing.
Places to avoid. Chernobyl.
A 1986 nuclear accident elevated this one-time shithole into the worst shithole of all time.
Asia.
Nickname Tiny. Asia was our biggest continent, an almost unfathomably large region stretching all the way from Russia in the west to Russia in the east. Nearly 2/3 of us lived here, many in our own 2 most populous countries, India and China, which contained over 1 billion cheap human beings. Much of Asia's southwest was paradoxically called the Middle East. It is a hot, sandy, unlivable wasteland. People died by the millions to keep possession of it.
Habitats. Cities.
Cities were high-density man-made ecosystems that were home to millions of people, billions of rats, and trillions of cockroaches. A delicate balance existed among the three species, each living with, and accidentally consuming the excrement of, the other two. What we got from them: great shopping, exciting nightlife, spectacular poverty, exhilarating crime, breathtaking squalor. What to look for: tattered remains of broken dreams, the first hopeful sprouts of grass appearing through cracked concrete as nature reclaims what is rightfully hers. What to eat? Nothing anymore. Too bad, the restaurants used to be top-notch. Surprising fact: Tokyo, our largest city, will be expecting you, as they have been destroyed by aliens many times before.
Landforms. Mountains.
Mountains were the features on topographical globes that made our fingers feel all tingly. But in person, they are foreboding death towers that offered us little but hardship, and 3 months of the year, excellent skiing.
Places to see. Three Gorges Dam.
You have not seen the Yangtze until you have seen the Yangtze behind a massive wall that displaced 1.3 million Chinese.
Places to see. Taj Mahal.
The ultimate testament to the eternal love between a man and his favorite wife.
Places to see. The Manila Folders.
A unique natural formation for document storage on the outskirts of the Filipino capital.
Places to avoid. The Stan family of countries.
While these countries may appear enticingly conquerable, they are not.
Africa.
Nicknames: the Dark Continent, the Dusky Continent, the Black People Continent. Our species arose from Africa, and we punished it for our failures ever since. Home to the world's largest desert, Sahara, longest river, Nile, and bleakest prospects, children, our second largest continent was also extraordinarily rich in plant and animal life and natural resources. Yet it remained wretchedly needy and war-torn, perennially exploited by outsiders who saw it merely as a place to colonize, plunder, and take photo safaris. Yes, no other continent could more truly say, I was raped.
Habitats. Deserts.
Deserts received less than 10 inches of rainwater a year, and beverages like juices and soda fell even less frequently. The few species that lived here took great pains to adapt themselves to the dry, brutal climate. As a reward, they got to live in this scorched hell on earth. What we got from them: oil, dehydration-induced hallucinations. What to look for: water. What to eat? For now, just focus on water. Surprising fact: that cool, refreshing lake you see shimmering in the distance? It's not real.
Landforms. Islands.
Islands came in a bewildering variety: tropical, treasure, deserted, leper, prison, fantasy. The list goes on. If you liked unique fauna, ferry boats, or drinks with crap sticking out of them, these were the places to be.
Places to see. Casablanca.
If you don't visit, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and for the rest of your alien life.
Places to see. Mount Kilimanjaro.
Brown on the bottom, white on top. Just like all of Africa used to be.
Places to avoid. The Sahara.
Less habitable than sub-Saharan Africa, which is really saying something.
Places to avoid. Blood Diamond Mine.
The wonders within brought joy to all that were not directly connected to their excavation.
Australia.
Nicknames: the land down under, the land up and to the left. That's just for New Zealand. Originally populated by Aborigines and marsupials, Australia came into its own only with the addition of a third group: hardened British criminals. Australia could have been our most impressive island, but no, they had to be a continent.
Places to see, Ayers Rock.
Beautiful, but insanely inconvenient. For Australians, visiting it was what visiting Australia was for the rest of us.
Places to see, Billabong.
A billabong was a small Australian lake, shaped like a yakka, that diverted from a nearby bladge hook following the midsummer dorsey wobbles.
Antarctica.
Nickname, the Latent Catastrophe. Antarctica is a barren land of bitter cold almost completely covered in permafrost. Well, at least it should be. If it is not, that could go a long way towards explaining why we're no longer here. Antarctica was not divided into countries. It was the one landmass on Earth nobody wanted. So in the end, it decided to start coming to us.
Habitats. Polar regions.
The harsh and frigid conditions of our extreme northern and southern latitudes supported only the cutest of animals. Penguins, seals, polar bears all came protected with adorable walks, thick layers of huggable fat, and childlike eyes that shamed off all but the club-happiest hunters. What we got from them? Liquid water, starting around 1991. What to look for? A rescue ship. What to eat? In order, rations, half rations, the sled dogs, each other. Surprising fact. Neither the East nor West Poles were ever discovered.
Natural disasters.
A number of Earth's natural processes had the unfortunate side effect of destroying everything we'd ever worked for. Events like those listed here not only decimated us, they also deeply tested our faith in God. We'll have more on him later. We optimistically chose to see these disasters not as signs that God did not love us, but that he loved us so much he would unexpectedly smite us with his mighty wrath for our own good.
Earthquakes.
The sudden shifting of tectonic plates will cause the ground to shake violently, toppling skyscrapers and rendering all but the shortest putts impossible. Residents of seismically active areas coped by developing quake-resistant buildings and probability-resistant psyches. Characteristic damage: buildings flattened like pancakes, pancakes flattened like crepes. Safety tip: stay away from chandeliers, shelves containing bowling balls, and California.
Floods.
Swollen rivers led to what urban planners called sudden liquid gentrification. We fought floods for thousands of years with, in decreasing level of effectiveness, dams, levees, sandbags, boating lessons, swimming lessons, and gill installation. Characteristic damage: all houses damaged, suede houses damaged irreparably. Safety tip: gather together 2 of every animal and build an ark 300 cubits long. That ought to do it.
Droughts.
You've noticed that a lot of these disasters involved too much water. Well, guess what? Too little water was also a problem. Alas, droughts were slow-motion disasters and thus unsuited as the subjects for summer blockbusters.
Hurricanes.
aka typhoons or cyclones, depending on ethnicity of victims. For a storm to be officially upgraded to a hurricane, the proudest moment in any storm's life, it had to produce either sustained winds of over 75 miles per hour or sustained FEMA funding of over $200 million a week. Characteristic damage: perfectly good first names tarnished forever. Safety tip: just strap yourself to a palm tree and ride it out.
Tornadoes.
aka twisters, cyclones, and rotating columns of fast-moving air from cumulonimbus clouds. They were most common in America's Great Plains, large swaths of which were rendered flat, desolate, and unlivable, then struck by tornadoes. Characteristic damage, cow impaled by trailer. Safety tip. Quickly, head to the cellar. Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Quick head count, is everybody in? Where's Grandpa? Where's Grandpa? Oh God, Grandpa! Grandpa! Oh no!
FAQs. Future alien questions.
Before we get too comfortable, can you tell us how much longer does your sun have before it explodes?
Don't worry. Old soul should be good for another 5 billion years or so. Baby runs like a dream. They don't make them like that anymore. Not around here, anyway.
What's the deal with the golf balls we found on the moon?
Oh, those. Yeah, they belong to Alan Shepard. He was an astronaut from Apollo 14. You know, it's funny. We spent thousands of years wondering what it would be like to walk on the moon. And then we got there, and within 18 months we were golfing, which is a thing we really only did when we ran out of other things to do.
We don't have land or ocean where we're from. How can we tell which is which?
All right, stick your tongue out. If you taste something wet and salty, you're in the ocean. If not, you're on land. If you don't have tongues, you'll just have to guess.
Why did the continents drift apart?
Well, there's nothing specific. No one can really pinpoint any one moment where it all went bad. It is a shame, though. They really did their best work as a supercontinent.
Any advice on avoiding natural disasters?
Yeah, you could try leading blameless lives free of sin. But if disaster strikes anyway, you could always blame the gay aliens. Do you call them galians?
By the way, we noticed several regions where millions of gallons of oil burst forth from the bottom of the ocean and destroyed hundreds of miles of coastline. Were those natural disasters too?
Oh, yes, that natural disaster. Yes, it was terrible when nature spilled its oil on us.
That Titanic wreck is really cool. Can you recommend some other good shipwrecks?
Well, hardcore Titanic fans might want to check out the explosive sequel, the RMS Lusitania. Killed nearly as many people and helped turn the tide of a world war. Unfortunately, the abstract concept it chose to symbolize, German imperialism, proved to have far less staying power than the Titanic's metaphor, human hubris. So it was historically relegated to also sank status.
Chapter 2. Life.
By now you've familiarized yourself with our planet's physical attributes, its oceans, land masses, and weather patterns. Perhaps you're ready for a more detailed discussion. Our Earth features 3 types of rock: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. So, but just busting your chops? Or humps? Or gills? Or giant heads? We know you didn't fly halfway across the Andromeda Galaxy for a geology lesson. You came here for the life. Well, fasten your seatbelts, buddy boy, because you're in for the life of your lives. You want biodiversity? We got biodiversity out the ass. Seriously, nearly all Earth creatures were host to some form of rectal parasite. My friends, we've got living organisms of every description imaginable: flying, swimming, hopping, writhing, capital L, life. Yeast cells not 3 microns across, and white whales big enough to sustain an 800-page novel's worth of symbolism. Boatloads of aerobes and giant nodes of anaerobes. We got chiropods, peds and peds, shedders and molters, bacteria cultures, and we just kept making more. Meiosis, mitosis, live births, egg births, seed births, and births so sexless, you gotta wonder why the parents even bothered. Around these parts, life squirms out of every underwater volcano, pitch black cave, rainless desert, and public toilet. You want solitude, brother? Venus is right next door. Of course, not everything on Earth qualifies as life. We had distinct standards to help separate the mere clumps of matter from the truly with it. To qualify as life, you had to meet not some, but all of the following criteria. Organization. It was considered bad form for a living creature to be just a random collection of molecules thrown together without consideration. Even if you're just a single cell without a nucleus, put an organelle on it. Something. Responsiveness. Living creatures react to stimuli. A simple test of responsiveness was known as the stick poke. Negative results led to toe nudging, cautious sniffing, and peeing on it. Positive results led to running away. Homeostasis. Feeling a little hot? Perhaps you'd like to excrete sweat to cool yourself down. You can't? Oh, that's right. You're a rock. Living things were equipped to maintain a state of balance. Physically. Emotionally, not so much. Metabolism. You know, anabolism and catabolism. Ingesting and excreting. All right, fine. Eating and shitting. Call them what you like, but if you can't do them, you're not alive. Growth. Living organisms grew. Earth's tallest living creature was Sequoia sempervirens, the giant redwood tree. Some grew to over 350 feet. Cutting these creatures down, while not one of life's defining traits per se, was still extremely satisfying. Reproduction. All living creatures were defined by their ability not only to propagate their species, but to giggle uncomfortably when shown pictures of other creatures doing the same. Of course, these minimum life requirements don't fully address what it meant to be alive. For even beyond all the metabolic processes, there was also an intangible essence separating the living from the not. Call it a soul or just a need that we had. Every living thing possessed a certain energy or life force that infused even the unicellular among us. You could not keep life down. There was a plant whose whole reason for being was to grow between the cracks of a broken piece of sidewalk. Life's bottom line was this. Every living creature fought like hell to stay that way. We found antibiotics to kill bacterial diseases, at which point those diseases just figured out a different way to start killing us again. Earth's creatures were in a constant, ever-changing strategic battle for the upper hand. Except spiders. Never quite found a counter for the rolled-up magazine. But as they say, that's life.
Building blocks.
The creation and sustenance of life required certain materials and conditions. Earth, due to both the circumstances of its formation and its self-assured, laid-back charm, happened to have these in abundance. With this fortunate situation, life on Earth was as varied as Mexican food. Basically, the same few ingredients, recombined in infinite yet extremely delicious permutations.
Water.
H2O was a fickle necessity. Too cold and it winds up wrapping mile-thick ice around its microbes before they can coalesce into anything interesting. Too hot, and it's no more fertile an environment than the steam room at the Friars Club. Luckily, Earth was located in the so-called Goldilocks zone, perfectly positioned to steal nourishment from the adorable baby bear that is our universe.
DNA.
DNA was the genetic blueprint in every cell of every living thing that contained precise instructions on how to make the next generation. We came to rely on DNA tracing to help us understand who we really were, often receiving the results during the Maury Povich show.
Sunlight.
Earth's original energy source, sunlight fueled plants' photosynthesis process, which converted CO2 to oxygen. Over eons, this made Earth's environment more hospitable to higher forms of animal life, some of which would go on to develop horrible skin cancer from too much sunlight. Well played, son. Well played.
The primordial soup.
The banquet of life began with the soup, specifically the primordial soup, the chemical ingredients that, when cooked correctly, produced the first spark of organic activity. The recipe for this soup was first conceived some 3.5 billion years ago, and in 1999 it was patented and kicked up a notch by Chef Emeril Lagasse.
Flora.
If you happen to encounter a life form that's greenish, can't chase you, and doesn't say much, that is a plant. These hardy beings ruled the earth for billions of years, until the advent of animals and their invention of salad. Though stupid, plants were attractive. aromatic, nutritious, and skilled in the production of oxygen. We spend a lot of our time trying to mow them down.
Fauna.
If you meet a life form that is moving around on its own, it's either an evil vine, out for revenge, or an animal. Animals were considered higher life forms than plants, advanced enough to have differentiated tissue and mature enough to handle sex. It's very hard to generalize about animals, partly because they're also different, and partly because we can't be sure which ones we took with us to the grave. But if all you're finding are cockroaches and rats, well, leave it to us to have destroyed every single animal except the two we most wanted dead.
Evolution.
The manner by which life originated and developed on Earth was a matter of some debate for us. Scientists believed it required a long, slow process of natural genetic change called evolution. As evidence, they pointed to every bit of relevant data ever gathered. Many others rejected the notion that man descended from monkeys as distasteful, believing instead that life and the cosmos itself was created by one or more gods. As evidence, they pointed to themselves believing it. You'll probably just end up teaching the controversy.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
How many different living beings existed on Earth when you were there?
3,000 quintillion.
How rough an estimate is that?
That is the exact number. It's 3,000 quintillion.
Which animal had the most species?
I believe that's beetles. There were over 1 million different kinds of them.
Wow. They must have been fascinating. How did everybody keep track of what life forms they were supposed to consume?
Well, by following the food chain, the who's who of who ate who, most creatures were simultaneously prey for larger predators and predators for smaller prey.
So there must have been times when the hunter became the hunted.
We see you've studied our taglines.
If we were interested in sampling the fare, which creatures would you recommend?
Well, we don't know your tastes, but if you're looking for a rich and satisfying meal, try animals. Then again, if your race is a bunch of pretentious space pussies, well, plants might be a better choice.
And what neighborhood has the best dining?
Most foodies favor the crust. In general, Earth's edibility decreases sharply once you enter its mantle.
How could you tell which plants were poisonous?
Towards the end, most of us just stopped eating them altogether, though usually the ones stuffed with cheese were safe.
What are the two small animals we're finding in large numbers near many of your scientific facilities?
Those are rats and guinea pigs. We use them to test everything from the latest theories of structural behaviorism to lip gloss. Try to treat them nicely. They've been through a lot.
Were there any rival theories to the theory of evolution?
No.
Really?
Well, there was one. It's called creationism, and to be honest, billions of people believed it, right to the end.
And what was the theory of creationism?
I really don't want to get into it.
Why not?
Because.
Come on.
Look, you're so damn curious, just check into a hotel room, open up the bedside table drawer, pull out a Bible, and start reading.
Hold on a moment. Wow.
Yeah, I know.
6 days? 6 days?
Yeah.
Chapter 3. Man.
It's 11:59 p.m., New Year's Eve. The door swings open and in walks, that's right, bitches, walks, the most incredible creature anyone has ever seen. Upright, hairless, with a frontal lobe that screams high cognitive functioning, this strange being moves in, redecorates the joint, and eats half the guests before the ball drops. Yeah, boy! Homo sapiens in the house! If the chronology of life on Earth were compressed into a year, humanity would have been around for only that final minute. But in that time, we managed to domesticate dogs, clone sheep, and kill off more species of arthropod than we could shake a stick at. You know, the stick we were holding in our now free-to-grasp hand. So how about a nice round of applause for man, the evolutionary Wunderkind? Good morning, Earth's creatures, and top of the food chain to you. Though our intellectual and spiritual prowess far outpaced that of all other organisms, I'm going to be honest here, we were not perfect. Our abilities could be exercised only within the confines of our own bodies. Now, on the off chance that you exist as amorphous vapors floating immaterially in space, bodies were portable, individual-sized carrying cases for the soul. Every human being was given exactly one such body at the moment of conception, so you could see why we would encase them in a thick, protective layer of fat. Now our bodies had their virtues, durability, the capacity for self-healing, and extraordinary pieces of bioengineering, like hands, eyes, the upper left quadrant of the clitoris. But for the most part, they were our weak spot. We were neither the fastest animal, that was the cheetah, nor the largest, that was the blue whale, nor the tallest, the giraffe, nor the prettiest, that was a tie, butterflies and well-groomed cocker spaniels. Yet we ruled over all of them. Why? Well, perhaps this riddle will shed some light. What has 3 pounds, 4 lobes, and just came up with the idea for guns? Yes, the brain was our big dog. A dense collection of neurons and their transmitters, it allowed for a level of functioning other fauna could only respond reflexively to direct stimuli about. Its relationship with the body could at times be fraught. Often no sooner would the mind begin to scale the heights of Mount Knowledge than it would receive a frantic call from Body Base Camp, demanding it return to oversee Operation Masturbate. We actually devoted the majority of our time and energy to satisfying our body's needs, wants, whims, tantrums, and crippling addictions. To the mind, the body was the loud, leaky, high-maintenance apartment it was forced to live in simply because it had nowhere else to crash. But consider it from the body's perspective. From the neck down, the human animal would just as soon have been left alone with its instincts, eating, sleeping, copulating, immediately sleeping again. These were natural functions that needed no input from upper management. Yet, to justify its job, Mr. Thinks-A-Lot had to constantly butt in with his doubts and diets and insufferable quests for meaning. To the body, the mind was a totalitarian dictator monitoring every aspect of its personal life, its eating, its breathing, its sexual habits, even when and in what room of the house it could defecate. This mind-body tension was the maddening core of our existence, but it was also remarkably productive. In some ways, their relationship was like that of the mismatched pairs of law enforcement officials whose misadventures constitute a significant portion of the television artifacts you will soon be finding. Yes, they were different, but it was those very differences that led them to success and ultimately a kind of grudging mutual respect. Homo sapiens may have been set apart from all other life on Earth by its intelligence, but only in conjunction with our physical selves was this intelligence able to adapt to its conditions, change its environment, and bend the world to its will for the greater good of everyone. The end result is the now lifeless hellscape you see before you.
The Rise of Man.
Although we shared 98.4% of our DNA with chimpanzees, that last 1.6% was what was known in anthropological circles as a game changer. Who knew that a slightly shorter ilium and a reduction of the supraorbital torus would be the difference between dressing in a suit and tie for work and being dressed in a suit and tie for our amusement?
Why We Ruled.
A series of crucial adaptations gradually enabled humanity to conquer the world.
Brain size.
This was the most critical factor. Over time, our brains increased from 400 milliliters, barely enough to feed a large family of baby spiders, to a zombie feast size 1,400 milliliters. These bigger brains allowed us to engage in abstract thought, which is a cool idea if you think about it.
Bipedal locomotion.
Walking on 2 feet freed our hands for carrying, increased our pursuit and escape speed, and improved our field of vision. It also made us no longer able to lick our own testicles. It was probably worth it.
Manipulative hands.
The newly liberated hands evolved into fine instruments capable of performing an extraordinary range of tasks, from flashing gang signs to testing for prostate cancer to helping us draw turkeys. The hand's project manager was the opposable thumb, which maintained an excellent working relationship with the other fingers, but remained aloof from them in its private life.
Language.
As our larynxes descended, we were able to make sounds with our mouths in new and far more expressive ways. Verbal language soon overtook physical gesturing as the primary means of communication for all human beings except Italians.
Tools.
Greater intelligence and dexterity allowed us to fashion and use tools. These were artificial extensions of ourselves that were harder or longer or grippier than we were. Naturally, we began to resent them, so we gained a level of revenge by making their names synonymous with douchebag.
Pioneering archaeologist Mary Leakey, 1913 to 1996, revolutionized the study of hominid evolution with her landmark 1964 publication, The Fuckability of Man.
Australopithecus afarensis was an extraordinary breakthrough in terms of brain capacity and dexterity, but he was no reputable female archaeologist's idea of a fun Friday night. Squat, hairy, hunched over, and less than 1.3 meters tall, one would not have tapped this if the future of the species depended on it. But females back then had not yet developed self-esteem, so they continued banging Australopithecus for the million years needed for the far sexier Homo habilis to emerge. This transitionally fuckable figure was a strangely charismatic bad boy with a taller stature, more human-like face, and a larger rib cage that recently unearthed fossil evidence suggests could have supported rock-hard pecs. While there is still some debate as to precisely how drunk he'd have to get you, serious bioevolutionists agree that after 4 beers you'd be at his place, on your back, and loving it. Yet even he cannot compare on the doability scale to Homo erectus. He was the pivotal moment, the threshold when man, and I do mean man, passed from why not to right now. To observe the reduction in post-canine dentition and vertical shortening of the face is to feel your honeypot start to flow. Plus, he had the dexterity to use diverse tools, if you know what I and the other ladies of the London University Neolithic Research Department mean. Oh, if only I were born 1.5 million years ago, I'd have banged him like a shin bone on an antelope skeleton.
Anatomy. Ideal.
A fully developed human body was a wonder of nature. Moulded by 3 million years of evolution and 20 years of individual maturation, it was a finely tuned mechanism, an intricate yet supple apparatus, willing and able to do the bidding of its master, the mind.
Anatomy. Actual.
Our bodies were rotting mobile junk drawers. Lulled by centuries of civilization into a comfort bordering on oblivion, they divorced themselves from physical challenges and began inexorably dissipating like sand castles at high tide.
Expression. Ideal.
We shone with the pride of world domination. Our faces expressed our haughty grandeur, with sensory organs loftily arranged to be kept well above the earth and the skittering creatures below.
Actual.
We carried ourselves as if our secret shames rode like hideous gargoyles on our shoulders.
Health. Ideal.
The forces of evolution forced us into disease and injury-resistant super beings. Our bodies healed our own wounds and chased off infection. On our best days, we felt ourselves nearly impervious to damage.
Actual.
Only a regular regimen of bioengineered chemicals kept us one step ahead of wholesale collapse, and even they could not stave off the aggregate weight of our chronic minor ailments. We had things shutting down, falling off, leaking out, fading away, and our prostates. My God, it felt like there was a Rubik's Cube jammed in there.
Posture. Ideal.
Surely, if any one thing distinguished us from our simian ancestors, it was the ramrod straightness of our spines, ideally suited for surveying the world over which we held sway.
Actual.
Yeah, we hunched like hobgoblins, feasting on the entrails of our broken dreams.
Genitals. Ideal.
Biologically adequate for the task of reproduction.
Actual.
Our secret weapon. And by our, we mean Larry King. It is the only plausible explanation.
Dexterity. Ideal.
Our delicate, nimble fingers could perform microsurgery, throw a fastball down the center of the plate, and tickle out an etude by Chopin.
Actual.
I feel something in my nose. I wonder what I can use to get at it.
Musculature. Ideal.
A finely meshed collection of fibers, from the humble bis, tris, and quads, to the more exotic quints, sects, and septs, were cunningly arrayed to propel us through the world and enable us to do the work of living.
Actual.
It was hard to get to the gym as much as we'd have liked, especially with the new hip and all. Even so, these man boobs, we swore we were going to knock them off by Memorial Day.
Parts of the body. Brain.
Repulsive, slimy seat of reason.
Neck.
Thin and flexible, for easy pivoting and or decapitation.
Skin.
Locked-in organs for freshness.
Arms.
Puppeteers of the hands, used for holding, lifting, popping and locking.
Hands.
The brain's two enforcers.
Fingers.
The enforcers hired goons.
Skeleton.
Indispensable solid structural support system and Halloween party favor.
Legs.
Kept the old genitals from dragging on the ground.
Lungs.
Warning, using these can greatly reduce your enjoyment of cigarettes.
Heart.
Dense, fibrous, fist-shaped muscle endlessly spewing gallons of blood. Symbol of romance.
Muscles.
No matter what you heard, far less important than listening skills and a good sense of humor.
Torso.
Most frequently aimed at part of body.
Navel.
Permanent reminder of the good old days.
Stomach.
Broke down food. One of only two organs with veto power over the brain. See genitals.
Intestines.
Large tube that absorbed nutrients from what we ate, leaving behind the last thing we'd want to eat.
Liver.
Performed dozens of essential functions, known to the cognoscenti as the organ's organ.
Kidney.
Produced urine. Preferred really not to discuss work with other organs. Note, urine and feces were the liquid and solid waste products resulting from digestion. Excreting them was the dirty little secret shared by all human beings, with the exception of movie stars, the President of the United States, and one's own mother.
Nailed it. The anus.
In engineering parlance, it was a simple elastic valve, but our demands on it were daunting. Leakage was a complete deal-breaker. Any stoppage was likewise a failure. Day in and day out, the anus gave us reliable performance from a key position. And positioning it so far away from our noses, genius.
Reproduction.
Like most mammals, humans were made up of two sexes, men and women. This made sexual reproduction possible and eased traffic congestion patterns in public restrooms. Strictly speaking, the differences between the sexes were purely anatomical, but in reality their ongoing disconnect formed a deep vagina of misunderstanding, seldom filled by the penis of knowledge. We will discuss the societal implications of this later. For now, just know that the images of the body parts you're looking at, while natural, are shameful. If we were alive today, we would never allow this type of trash to be sold in any of our finer, enormous, low-wage, bulk sale, discount chain superstores. We used to make up stories for our children to explain where they came from. But an advanced race like you can probably handle the truth. What follows is a candid excerpt from the 1955 film strip Reproduction. As much as you need to know.
Sometimes, when a man and woman love each other very much, they decide to create another human being to fight the creeping communist menace. With their clergyman's blessing, they go to the soda shop and exchange sips of chocolate malted. The fertilized malt makes its way down the mummy's throat to her tummy, where it can be more easily concealed by loose clothing. 9 months later, God punishes the mummy for sipping the forbidden malt by nearly ripping her vagina in two. This is J. Edgar Hoover, and I approve this baby-making method.
The senses.
We perceive the outside world using 5 senses. A few of us had a 6th called gaydar, which, while far less important, did provide hours of bitchy fun. Sight was the sense we used to process visual imagery and to determine if something made us look fat. It was handy for distinguishing many characteristics, such as color, which was notoriously difficult to determine by taste. People who could not see were blind and often used this as an excuse to urinate in their friends' closets. Hearing was vital for communication, and even more vital for miscommunication. It was distinct from listening, which could only be achieved when hearing was combined with giving a shit. People who could not hear were deaf and talked with their hands. Unfortunately, this shifted everything over one, and they ended up having to feel with their mouths and taste with their ears. Touch was a nervous system feature that allowed us to process texture and temperature. There were 2 kinds of touching, good and bad. Only one of them required the implementation of a national computerized registry. There was a time when taste was completely in sync with our nutritional needs. Alas, our tongues and our health stopped speaking sometime around the invention of the Hot Pocket. Smell was primal. Somehow, the detection of a few airborne molecules could instantly take us back to that magical summer in the Poconos, marshmallows by the bonfire, Julie's freckles, fishing with Dad, that big bass we caught, and then the incident, the screaming, the smell of Julie's charred flesh. Why hadn't we put out the bonfire? Oh, we were too busy fishing with that damn bass fishing rod that we... Oh, Julie, we're so sorry, Julie. Oh, God, forgive us all. Anyway, that smell.
Basic needs. Food and water.
Food and water were our 2 most basic needs. Both existed in good quantity, but were somewhat unevenly distributed. While millions of us died of starvation and thirst, millions of others were so sated they could afford to use pies, round fruit or cream-filled pastries with enough fat content to sustain a human being for several days, as comedic projectiles, and water as giant slide lubricants. Never quite figured this one out.
The 5 food groups.
Number 1, meat. It tasted like victory. Number 2, dairy. Food we stole from baby mammals. Number 3, fruits and vegetables. Our most nutritious option, eaten reluctantly. Number 4, grains. Their production required a continual scaring of crows. Number 5, an ever-increasing amount of fried shit.
Things some of us liked. Delicacies.
Food could be used to assert ethnic identity in the form of delicacies that one culture found delicious and the rest of the world found nauseating.
Haggis.
What it was? A sheep's heart, liver and lungs stuffed and boiled inside its own stomach. Who ate it? Scots and sociopathic wolves. How they came up with it? First developed as a projectile to hurl at English invaders. Why others found it gross. Preferred ground pig snouts and anuses served in intestine casing, on bun with ketchup. Suggested beverage pairing, sheep's blood mixed with sheep's milk and sheep's mucus drunk from sheep's skull.
Hazma.
Frog fallopian tubes boiled in sugar water. Who ate it? The Chinese, for dessert. How they came up with it. What other female frog part were they supposed to eat? The clitoris? It's all gristle. Why others found it gross. Deprived frogs of hard-won reproductive freedom. Suggested beverage pairing. Anything alcoholic, but lots of it and beforehand.
Balut.
What it was? A near fully developed duck fetus boiled and eaten in the shell. Who ate it? Southeast Asians, freshman pledges at Delta Kappa Epsilon. How they came up with it, inspired by Khmer Rouge method for remedying incorrect thought. Why others found it gross. Embryonic ducks? Yummy. Adult ducks? Mouth-watering. But in between, inhuman. Suggested beverage pairing, a burgundy. Preferably while making eye contact with the egg's mother.
Peeps.
What it was. Hyper-sweetened marshmallow candies shaped like baby animals. Who ate it? Americans and marshmallow snakes. How they came up with it. Railway disaster involving Necco wafers, plumber's caulk, and spent fuel rods. Why others found it gross. Even on the molecular level, did not contain the building blocks of food. Suggested beverage pairing. Key lime-flavored Mad Dog 2020.
Sleep and dreams.
We spent a third of our lives passed out unconscious. It's not something we're proud of, believe us. If we hadn't needed so much sleep, we'd be the ones who developed intergalactic space travel, and you'd be the ones whose underwear drawers were being rummaged through. But the truth was, our bodies required roughly 8 hours a day of sleep. We usually only got around 5. It was more than a necessary part of our biology. It was a nightly exercise in trusting the universe. Every night, we'd lay down on a bed, either alone or with a spotter, close our eyes and surrender ourselves to a void, hoping that we'd be waiting for us when we got back. The body rested during sleep, but the brain did not. It amused itself by emitting waves and generating dreams, illogical series of images, thoughts, and emotions that could be amusing, terrifying, or downright sexy. Dreams also came to mean a person's highest aspirations in life. Why so many people aspired to be naked in front of large groups of people while running slowly in place is really beyond the scope of this audiobook.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
Was it better to be a man or a woman?
A man.
Is it fair to say the brain was the most important organ?
In matters of intellect, motor control, sensory perception, and the formation of personality, yes. But when it came to the truly important things, the heart held sway.
But didn't the brain also control the heart?
Yes, fine. God, whatever happened to romance?
What percentage of you was water?
I'd say about 2/3. That's why when you shook us really fast, we made kind of a swishy sound. But the water was evenly distributed throughout our bodies. It wasn't like everything below our rib cage was liquid or anything. That'd be stupid.
Why was the right side of your body more coordinated than the left side?
That's how God made us. Unfortunately, about 10% of us chose an alternate lifestyle. Many of them excelled in the arts, but that doesn't make it right.
What was the tallest a person could grow?
Robert Wadlow reached a record height of 2.72 meters, or 8 foot 11 inches tall. He wore size 37 shoes and consumed 8,000 calories a day. It took 500 people 7 weeks to make him a pair of pants. He had a pet rhinoceros that he kept in his pocket. When he died, the earth dug up for his grave became Mount Whitney.
How did you know whether you were asleep or simply unconscious?
It really depended on whether the objects that were circling your head were birds or letter Z's.
Were you allowed to walk around without clothes on?
Only at nudist colonies, which were special penal facilities designed to punish out-of-shape nonconformists by making them look at each other naked all the time.
What was the evolutionary reason for pubic hair?
Well, millions of years ago, when man began losing his fur, the genitals decided they wanted to be the new kings of the body. So they kept their hirsute covering, believing the head's rich mane of hair was the reason the body took its orders. Unfortunately, the genitals, as they so often are, were wrong. And so we were left with nettled thatches of coily tresses that served little function, except minimal insulation and the ability to be shaved into a lightning bolt pattern.
How did you know when you'd had enough food?
That's a difficult question. The answers ranged from if you didn't drop dead to when you'd won a free t-shirt.
Why were men unable to give birth?
their butt vaginas were infertile.
Chapter 4. The Life Cycle.
In some ways, mankind was incredibly diverse. We like to say that each person was like a snowflake, unique, precious, and sooner or later covered in exhaust and dog urine. Yet, all of our lives traced roughly the same arc from beginning to end, and passed through roughly the same milestones. It was a process we called the life cycle, because it reminded us of a popular stationary exercise bike that was exhilarating but grueling and wound up leaving you off exactly where you started. What was this life cycle? Well, perhaps we can answer that question with another one. What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 in the evening? At first blush, the answer to that ancient riddle of the Sphinx would seem obvious. A 4-legged animal that had 2 legs amputated following a terrible lunchtime accident, then had one of them reattached just before dinner. But there's also a more figurative answer to the mystery. Man. For in the morning of our lives, we crawled on all 4s, young, small, and vulnerable. In the prime of the afternoon, we walked erect, adult, robust, and independent. And by the evening, we walked with a cane, old, small, vulnerable once more. And then, of course, at night we died. No legs. That part was too depressing, even for the Sphinx. The chronology and physical stages of the life cycle took place in the sequence that they are presented in this chapter. We did not have the option of starting life as an adolescent, or jumping from middle age back to infancy to grab a quick nap, or aging backwards, which is the premise of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a film that we urge you to avoid, lest it steal 3 precious Earth hours from you. But we did have some flexibility in the order with which certain personal and societal milestones could occur. For instance, we could give birth before marriage, or be circumcised after middle age, turns of events which were respectively common and really super not at all common, like ever, never. It was these milestones, shared and celebrated with loved ones and friends, that helped form the chapter breaks in the stories of our lives, lending our time on Earth much of its dignity and poignancy, and all of its redeemable gift certificates, the exception being funerals. Hey, sorry about your dad. Please enjoy this $50 iTunes card was considered a funeral don't. Which once again brings us to death. In truth, pretty much everything brought us to death. The famed philosopher Jim Morrison once observed, "No one here gets out alive." And that was certainly true, although not everybody ended up alone and bloated after ODing in a bathtub either. But dying wouldn't have been that sad or frightening if only we didn't know it was going to happen. But alas, we were, as far as we could tell, the only creatures who were aware of their own mortality. I mean, most animals you could kill right in front of their friends and they would just keep on chewing their cud, at most idly wondering a few days later where Frank was. But humans, we knew the horrible truth. That was the price we paid for consciousness, and many would argue we got ripped off. So how did we react to this terrible knowledge? Some of us with paralyzing fear. Others chose to use this life to feverishly prepare for the afterlife they hoped would follow. And a few of us reacted by adhering to the phrase carpe diem, seizing each and every diem with as much urgency and spirit as we could muster, because paradoxically, it was only by accepting the fleeting nature of our existence that we could fully appreciate how much every moment, just like every person and every snowflake, was unique and precious. Having said that, if you're immortal, go fuck yourself.
Birth.
Around 40 weeks after that drunken night in the cabin, the adult, hopefully, female's uterus began contracting. This forced the fetus onto the cervix, thinning and dilating it, and rupturing the amniotic sac. As the painful contractions increased in frequency and intensity, 8 to 14 hours, the 8-pound, 22-inch infant journeyed down the birth canal towards the vagina. The baby's head passed under the pubic bone and began to stress the perineum, the tissue between the vagina and the rectum, often tearing it. Through a storm of screams, amniotic fluid, mucus, and blood, the final pushes introduced the bundle of joy to the outside world, he, she, wailing uncontrollably. And with that, the easy part was over.
Childhood.
Childhood was roughly the period between the end of infancy and the day we were big enough to hold a scythe. It was the child's job to play during this carefree time, to learn through observation, imagination, and interaction about the real world around them. And it was the job of a loving parent to skillfully distort the reality of that world. This often involved overt lying on topics ranging from the physical location of the recently deceased to the existence of gift-giving fictional characters to why Mommy's special juice made her all silly.
Nailed it. Kids 4 to 9 years old.
Toilet-trained, able to dress themselves, yet still a few years away from the embittering ravages of puberty, kids saw the world the way we wished we always could, as magical, mysterious, and full of places it was okay to be naked. They were the only group of people who excited rather than annoyed us by learning things we already knew.
Adolescence.
Somewhere between the ages of 10 and 13, depending on how hormone-enhanced their beef was, children entered adolescence, aka the decutening. Our bodies grew taller and hormonal changes introduced secondary sex characteristics. It was a period marked by turbulent emotions and excruciating self-consciousness and a level of masturbation so furiously excessive it tested the human body's resistance to friction-induced combustion.
Spotlight on masturbation.
Masturbation. Masturbation was the practice of tricking one's genitals into believing themselves popular. For both boys and girls, the adolescent discovery that intense physical gratification was literally an arm's length away marked the end of childhood and the beginning of an awful lot of masturbating. But the practice was almost universally discouraged by society, especially on the good couch.
Young adulthood.
Young adulthood was a magical time for us. We were old enough to enjoy the privileges society could provide, but still young enough to skirt its responsibilities. It was a period to indulge wild fantasies with regard to sex, intoxicants, and the likelihood of one's punk emo band, the sad-eyed cock monkeys, making it big. We were at the height of our physical powers, and at times felt ourselves immortal, which, as we have made and will continue to make heartbreakingly clear throughout this audiobook, we were not. But it was fun to pretend, and of course the booze made it easier.
In the ruins. Universities.
Found yourself in a quadrangle courtyard surrounded by impressive stone buildings that fill you with a simultaneous sense of pride, dread, and wooziness? Welcome to college, where many of our brightest 18 to 21-year-olds explored their bottomless thirst for what in some cases was knowledge. Colleges were hotbeds of experimentation, educational, chemical, sexual, and most annoyingly, political. After 4 years of living in this fake world, you were considered prepared to live in the real one, and you graduated. This experience would cost either your parents or you $200,000, unless you were good at throwing an orange ball into a round hoop, in which case it was free. Many students participated in what was known as Greek life after the ancient society whose intellectual legacy it shat upon.
Love.
Of all the intangible emotions and states of mind experienced by man, love is by far the easiest to explain. Love was simply liking another person very, 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 very much. So that's it. But you would not believe how much time and effort poets, painters, philosophers, songwriters, and most unfortunately, teenagers expended trying to express this unbelievably basic and simple feeling.
Great love stories. Antony and Cleopatra.
Known in Roman tabloids as Antopatra, they were true pioneers, the first celebrity couple, and the founders of the Nile High Club.
Jon Smith and Pocahontas.
In 1607, explorer Jon Smith, not his real name, was saved from execution at the hands of a Virginia tribe by the chief's daughter, Pocahontas. Their romance set the stage for 400 years of warm relations between whites and Indians.
Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson.
He was the King of England. She was a twice-divorced American, but they fell in love over their mutual admiration for the Nazis.
Bonnie and Clyde.
Before Bonnie and Clyde, traveling across country, killing people and stealing their money was not considered romantic.
John and Yoko.
Yoko Ono was one of the most cutting-edge performance artists of the 20th century until she met John Lennon. Their relationship was responsible for the breakup of Fluxus, her world-renowned conceptual art collective. Fluxus fans never forgave him.
No one came closer to capturing the essence of love than the Romantic poets. One of them, Lord Byron, 1788 to 1824, wrote this immortal ode as a 15-year-old.
She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. Her eyes are like two pools of light. I really doth like her eyes. Her smile canst fill the study hall and make of homeroom fairyland. And pleased I was to learn this fall she'd sit 2 seats from me in band. Alas, the cheers she leads are for the captain of the cricket team, who really is a total jerk, which doesn't rhyme, but I don't care. Written by Lord Byron. To be folded up and passed across the line of desks to the left.
Marriage.
Marriage was the sacred institution on which our society was based, and therefore had to be protected from gay people. You see, sometimes when a man and a woman's father loved the mutual economic and social benefits a partnership of sorts could provide very much, the woman's father drew up a contract for a betrothal involving his daughter and some cattle. Later on, women gained the right to make their own decisions about who they would marry. That's when men began shaving.
Parenthood.
For most of man's existence, religious imperatives, agrarian workloads, and a total lack of reproductive knowledge led many couples to have very, very large families. However, advances in contraception and industrialized food production allowed modern couples to have fewer offspring while leaving the total weight of families constant.
What it took to raise a child.
Africa, a village. Somalia, a guerrilla army. India, a shanty town. Brazil, a soccer ball. America, a television. New York, a West Indian nanny. Romania, a 500-bed orphanage with a staff of 2. The Middle East, generations of hatred.
Middle age.
Middle age is the first phase of life marked by decline in recognition of one's mortality. Physical vitality, muscle mass, and intellectual acuity all begin their inexorable downward slide during this period. On the plus side, you can now afford jet skis. Though middle age was seen as the period of time between 40 and 60 years of age, this varied greatly due to changing life expectancies. For instance, victims of midlife crisis during the Dark Ages would comfort themselves with the thought that 20 is the new 16.
Old age.
The final stage of life, old age, was in many ways a mirror image of childhood. Life's hard labors complete, the elderly returned to a time of less responsibility, where, as with children, little was expected. People once again spoke to you in an incredibly condescending tone. On the other hand, the elderly could get away with all manner of shit, up to and including promiscuity, racist blather, and the inappropriate hugging of Jamaican nurses. Early man revered the elderly, and they occupied a space of honor in the community. In modern times, we kept them away from us in condo developments, because it made us sad to think about dying.
Death.
Death that was often observed was just another part of life. Usually this observation was made right after someone died, and mostly because we didn't know what else to say and didn't want to be rude. While the rites associated with death were ostensibly performed for the benefit of the dead, in reality they served to provide the survivors with the comfort, guidance, and tranquility needed to complete their own journey to the unfortunate day when their ribcage became gopher housing.
The bucket list.
A bucket list was a wish list of things to do before one's imminent death. This example dates from 1st century Rome.
Caligula bucket list. Dissolve Senate? Check. Fuck sister? Check. Declare myself God? Check. Appoint horse to Senate? Check. Sodomize army? Check. Throw babies to lions? Check. Find the joy in my life? No check.
Morning.
When a person died, his family, friends, and a sallow-cheeked, formaldehyde-scented man they just met organized a funeral. This ceremony was a chance for the living to say goodbye, albeit a few days too late. With his body looking on, the departed would be eulogized, his good points emphasized, his bad points somewhat glossed over, his soul's current whereabouts confidently asserted. This provided the bereaved with closure, and the unbereaved with credit for showing up.
Okay, notes for Dad's eulogy. Thanks for coming, deep in grief, etc. Special man, tragic death on merry-go-round, great father to 5 kids, no, 6 kids. Okay, good qualities. Handy around the house when present. Awesome 6th husband. Always supported me and my brother. No, sometimes didn't hinder my brother. Okay. War hero. How he wanted to be one. Loved Wizard of Id. Molestation? No. Okay. Happy memories. Florida vacation. Day 2. Day 8. Christmas. Oh, bike. Right. 1982. Oh my god, the mistrial. I gotta mention the mistrial. Alright. Funny dad stories. Funny dad stories. Funny dad stories. Oh, the time he saw John Elway at the airport. Okay. Alley incident. Vomit. Oh, Karen and the pistol. Punchline. Dad, she's your sister. Dad, she's your sister. Closing metaphor. Putting Bird out of misery. Done.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
What was the happiest period in a human's life?
Either the one immediately preceding the period one was currently in, or the one immediately following it.
What did humans remember from the period between conception and birth?
We retain no long-term memory of anything that occurred to us between conception and roughly the age of 2 or 3. Most of us, therefore, simply assumed it was a time of unceasing abuse.
When did you start becoming sexually active?
Biologically, reproduction was possible from puberty. Legally, we were supposed to refrain from sex until reaching the age of consent. This could vary anywhere from, oh my God, that's disgusting, to, really? You waited that long? That's a long time to wait. In many countries, the standard was 18. 6 months following were a probationary period in which the barely legal adolescent was thoroughly photographed and scrutinized by a panel of masturbating experts.
Could both men and women be homosexuals?
Yes, but not with each other. It was
What were the most common ways of proposing marriage?
A man would most commonly declare his intentions by presenting his beloved with a diamond ring on a large television during a packed sporting event. In the rare cases when a woman asked the man to marry, she would often do it by urinating on a stick and showing him the results.
In a population of billions, how did you decide whom to marry?
Well, most of us believed we had one perfect soulmate somewhere on Earth. Luckily for us, that person usually lived not too far away, also spoke the same language, and was of an equivalent level of physical attractiveness, and shared our love of mountain biking.
Parenthood seems like a lot of work.
It sure was. But for all the hassle and worry, once in a while came a moment of pure innocence. It touched your heart and tickled your funny bone. Nah, fuck it, it was a lot of work.
How did humans cope with the finality of death, the knowledge that one day they and all their accumulated knowledge and experiences would be lost from the earth?
We tried not to think about it.
Seriously, though, that must have been hard not to think about. One day you're there, and the next, you're gone.
Can we talk about something else? Please?
But given that knowledge, how did you justify wasting your time on unimportant things when every minute brought you that much closer to...
Hey, look! Another chapter!
Chapter 5. Society.
No man is an island, wrote the English poet John Donne. Hell is other people, wrote the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Most of human history was an attempt to reconcile these two seemingly irreconcilable truths. Technically speaking, a human being could survive on his own. He could hunt for food, construct shelter, and, if not reproduce, at least create a reasonable facsimile of a mate using twigs, branches, and a couple of coconuts. But we were social creatures who functioned best living in close proximity to one another, and living in groups vastly improved both our safety and our gossip. So we banded together into communities governed by shared sets of morals and values. Such a group was referred to as a society, who was the central organizing unit of our civilization and the catch-all scapegoat for any part of your life that didn't quite work out the way you thought it would. A society was simultaneously one unified mass and a large collection of individuals. Therein lay the tension. For to be part of a group was to exchange certain individual freedoms for certain other collective benefits. These benefits derived largely from economies of scale. A city of 5 million people is far better equipped to construct, say, a working mass transit system than an individual family of 4. It just is. But in exchange for the mass transit system, each member of society was expected to adhere to rules regarding its use, i.e., don't masturbate on it. Such harsh, at times maddeningly frustrating trade-offs were the basis of the social contract, a document that differed from other contracts only in that you had no choice but to enter it and it didn't exist. The social contract provided a framework in which human interaction could occur on a reasonably fair basis. For example, let's say person A owned a slave that person B wanted. Were they not inhabitants of a civil society governed by law, person B could have simply stolen person A's slave through brute force. Such an existence would have been cruel and terrifying for all parties involved, person A and person B. But for members of a society, violence was forbidden. Person B was allowed to purchase the slave. He stole him. He was guilty of a crime. He had to repay person A the dollar value of the human being that he had stolen. This was how a civilized society operated. Now, that's not to imply that the social contract was fixed and unchangeable. There were thousands of different contracts. Some put power in the hands of one man, others in the hands of thousands of men. Was usually men, though. That part didn't change a whole lot. Each contract itself was subject to constant change and revision. A society that failed to periodically amend outdated provisions regarding how to dress or how much to subjugate women and minorities could find itself the laughingstock of diplomatic functions, unless it happened to be strategically situated atop vast reserves of natural resources. The social contract could be administered in a variety of ways, including law, custom, and etiquette. Violators of the code could receive anything from a dirty look from a maitre d' to death by lethal injection. The mark of a good maitre d' was that he could make the two seem equivalent. On the other hand, those who went out of their way to serve society would often receive a certificate of commendation. But reinforcement, both positive and negative, was not the only way society enforced its social contract, which brings us to war. War was the ultimate contract enforcer, a way of determining by purely physical means which party was morally correct. Untold hundreds of millions of us died in wartime, approximately half as heroic martyrs and half as dishonorable villains. But they did not die in vain. Through war, we arrived at definitive answers to questions at the very heart of our existence, from which is the one true religion to which European power gets to kill the Zulus. Answers: pantheism, Judaism, Roman paganism, Christianity, Islam, Christianity again, Catholicism, Nazism, and then finally democracy and the Dutch. We begin our examination of society with a look at its most primitive and thus worst incarnation.
Nomadic tribes.
In terms of social organization, tribes were one step up from a single family, a large group of people living together, bound by related bloodlines or a shared appreciation of the music of Jerry Garcia. Many tribes were nomadic, meaning they had no fixed physical address and traveled constantly, racking up record numbers of frequent walker miles. These movements were usually in response to changing seasons, their prey's migratory patterns, or the orders of the federal government.
Nomadic tribes. Benefits, drawbacks.
Mastery of all you survey.
Impertinent droids, retired Jedis.
Plenty of exercise.
Until you get old and are left behind to die.
Live amongst natural splendor, protected from modern man.
Modern man will find and kill you for timber.
Villages.
With the advent of agriculture, nomadic tribes learned the value of sleeping in and established permanent villages for the purpose. The earliest villages were simple collections of huts whose proximity to one another provided safety from predators and the reliable transmission of tribal oral histories, also known as gossip. Later, villages grew large enough to accommodate new enterprises, such as churches, schools, and alcohol consumption facilities, which often became the center of village life due to the fact that they were the only buildings that didn't remind people of goddamn farming.
Villages. Benefits, drawbacks.
Enough boobs to fill a National Geographic special.
Enough elderly scrotum to fill your worst nightmare.
Small size meant shared assumptions and values.
Trivial disagreements blown up into decades-long feuds.
Everyone participates in communal events.
Participation may include being burned to death as a witch.
Cities.
Successful villages grew into cities, where trade and culture flourished alongside crime, squalor, and fecal and pest-borne diseases. The large population allowed for ever greater specialization among artisans and craftsmen, until every city had one guy who did nothing but stand around the market playing Peruvian flute all day. It was fucking maddening. Great surges in ideas and technology were counterbalanced by periodic plagues that wiped out 2 out of every 3 inhabitants, setting civilization back almost as far as it had come, but also making rents considerably more affordable.
Cities. Benefits, drawbacks.
If you could make it here, you could make it anywhere.
Many did not make it here.
Teeming masses from across the globe exchanging cultures, ideas, and cuisines.
Teeming masses meant no room for a bathtub except the middle of the kitchen.
Sex, drugs, depravity.
Sex, drugs, depravity.
Nation-states.
When cities, villages, and tribes banded together under one common title, as the individual people had previously banded together to form cities, villages, and tribes, then they became mighty nations. Or states, or nation-states. We use the words kind of interchangeably. Perversely, we were often more attached to our nations than we were to our cities, villages, and tribes, even though we tended to have less in common with the other members. That's just the way we rolled.
Nation-states. Benefits, drawbacks.
Disparate population bonded by strong sense of national pride.
Disparate population bonded by strong sense of hunger.
Security assured by standing army.
Congratulations, soldier! Now drop and give me 20.
Welfare state supports vulnerable in society.
Who knew the poor could be so expensive?
Government.
Just as we had no one language, we also had no one form of government, though many throughout history were advertised as imperfect but the best ever devised.
Monarchy.
Monarchy spoke to our primal desire for the alpha male who would fight off our enemies, make decisions for us, and tear out our throats if we challenged them. Of course, we did try to dress it up a bit. The Greek thinker Plato envisioned an ideal society ruled by philosopher kings, enlightened guardians who would steer the ship of state with wisdom and justice. This happened exactly 0 times. The most common path to the throne was hereditary succession, which was frankly a bit of a crapshoot.
Communism.
Many people believed the ideal society should maximize human happiness by treating all people as absolute equals. This system, under which millions were enslaved and murdered, was called communism. It was premised on the belief that private property should be abolished and that poverty could be eliminated if everyone worked as well as they could and consumed nothing excessive. This was expressed in the maxim, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, which aptly set the stage for a form of government that excelled in producing a bounty of cumbersome maxims. In the middle of the 19th century, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, the theoretical paper on which communism looked really good. In it, they spelled out both a descriptive class-based theory of history and a prescriptive theory of political and social equality, which would come to have a profound influence on stoned college sophomores for centuries to come.
Have you ever thought how crazy it is that, there's so much stuff? But some people have a lot of stuff, way more than they need. And then other people don't even have enough to live with dignity, right? Shit, man, it's not fair. It's no wonder that the guys who don't have anything are totally pissed at the rich guys who are basically, hoarding the stuff they need. That's the whole history of the world, you know? Those guys being mad at those other guys, and sometimes they get really mad and just fucking take what's theirs, you know? That happens over and over again forever. But it doesn't belong to them any more than it belonged to the other guy. It belongs to everyone. We all work hard. Hey man, pass me that shit. Hold up. Whoa. What are we talking about? You want to order a pizza? If I order a pizza, you'll have some though, right? Sure, I'll get some crazy bread. We should get some crazy bread. Why is it called crazy bread? It doesn't make you crazy. You know, if it made you crazy, then it's crazy bread, but it makes you full. 'Cause it's delicious bread. They should call that shit delicious bread.
Fascism.
Fascism was generally defined as that thing someone else is doing that I disagree with. No, not communism, the other one. In practice, fascism was a totalitarian system of government whereby citizens lived under a strong central authority that exerted control over nearly all aspects of their lives. Again, not communism. The difference being fascism's penchant for spiffy uniforms, cool logos, and a really fanatical devotion to the state. With an emphasis on nationalist pride and ancestral bonds, fascists believed that a nation's strength came from its people, minus the darkies, queers, oldies, and tards. Citizens who objected were dubbed intellectuals and loaded onto the same trains as the tards and queers. And those trains, mind you, did run on time. By no means monolithic, fascism encompassed many streams of thought, from the state is all I will ever care about to the more nuanced, make it stop, dear God, yes, I will tell you the names of the resistance leaders.
Nazis.
We really can't go any farther here without explaining these guys. Yes. Nazis were fascists. But they were really the fascists, the ones who defined the movement forever. Nothing horrified or amused and fascinated us like Nazis. Their defining characteristics were competence, brutality, and a fetishization of masculinity that turned all of Germany into one big, smelly, homoerotic gym class. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler used pseudo-scientific theories of racial superiority to justify killing millions in death camps and destroying most of Europe. He was also a vegetarian. There is apparently no word for irony in German.
In the ruins. Concentration camps.
There is a possibility you might find some barbed wire compounds that just radiate death and horror. Right? Yes, we did build them. And then we preserved them. But we only preserved them to remind us how ashamed we were of building them. And it's not like we set more than a handful of children's movies in them. Please don't judge us on this one terrible thing we did. We would really rather you judge us on the thousands of slightly less horrible things we did.
Anarchy.
Few political ideas provoke such widely divergent opinions as anarchy, the state of no government. To anarchy's fans, such as the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau and teen skateboarder Matt Gudmundsen, it was a condition of unfettered personal liberty, where individuals could realize their full potential, free from stifling authority and bullshit. To critics, such as Thomas Hobbes and Matt Gudmundsen's hard-ass father, it was a perilous hellscape where violence ruled, human enterprise was dissipated in chaos, and furniture was never moved down to the basement, despite repeated instructions to move it before you go skateboarding. Who was right? Well, we never really figured it out, because we never lived in anarchy for any sustained period. Really, it was less a system of governance than a transitory state, like orgasm, adolescence, or drunkenness.
Bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy was the opposite of anarchy. Whereas anarchy destroyed property, bureaucracy generally destroyed the soul. It wasn't even a real form of government. It was just a parasite that attached itself to whatever form of government was around. And though bureaucracy's goals could be called laudable, the standardization of procedure and otherwise large ungovernable groups, it always wrapped itself in a protective cocoon of inflexibility, paperwork, and mean ladies who were too busy with their personal calls to talk to you.
Democracy.
First practiced by the ancient Greeks, democracy came from their word demokratos, meaning a short break from pederasty to deal with the zoning issue. The major strength of democracy was that every citizen had a voice in government. The major weakness of democracy was that every citizen had a voice in government. The risks were high for short-sighted rule by mob whim, inaction caused by deadlocked interest groups, or your favorite TV shows being preempted by some boring debate. In exchange for control over their own destinies, democracy demanded one great sacrifice from its practitioners: a lunch break trip to an elementary school gym once every, I'd say, 2 to 4 years. Generally, this was too much to ask. Citizens found the energy to vote only when they believed their wealth, guns, or vaguely defined concept of freedom were threatened. In fact, a democracy's health could best be measured by the number of people who didn't vote, thus signaling they were completely satisfied. Democracy proved to be surprisingly resilient in times of chaos or social change.
Elections.
The mechanism by which people ruled was called the election. It's a series of discrete events encompassing nominations, rallies, and backroom deals that completely dominated the news of the day, unless someone famous got married, divorced, or died. Political oratory could lift us above the mire, or sink us deep beneath it. As this speech from Roman Senator Cicero shows, the latter was much more common.
In assessing the fitness of Senator Cestus for the office of proconsul, there are no doubt those who approve the choice based on his so-called heroic service as captain of a swift bireme in the Gallic Wars. But I declaim unto them on this day that he never served on a swift bireme, and that he is no hero, and that he is a liar and a coward. And I say this with certainty, for I have an acquaintance whose cousin heard these verities directly from a guy who was there. Further, is it not troubling that no certificate exists, proving beyond doubt that Senator Cestus was natural born of Rome, rather than, I don't know, say, Kenya? I am willing to believe the senator, would he just proffer the papers in plain Latin. Oh, and is it just this orator, or does it seem awfully suspicious that Cestus refuses to deny siring an illegitimate Ethiopian baby? I know, right? Right.
Law and order.
In the criminal justice system, the people were represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police, who investigated crime, and the district attorneys who prosecuted the offenders. These are their stories. Chung chung!
Law.
The codification of the law was a process as old as humanity itself. Though legal codes varied through time and geography, murder was almost universally forbidden, except in 21st century Baltimore.
Order.
Throughout human history, bands of brave men and women, largely Irish, were tasked with keeping the criminal element at bay. Modern law enforcement would have been impossible without the two totems of police power, the badge and the gun. The badge was society's permission slip to transgress behavioral norms in pursuit of justice. The gun was the most extreme form of that transgression. Also important, the mop handle. The first professional metropolitan police force, London's Bobbies, was founded as a means of providing employment for men with enormous melon-shaped heads. Law was sometimes meted out by vigilante mobs, though thankfully many of these lynchings were later overturned by DNA evidence.
Trial by jury.
The legal process reached its apex with the formulation of this adversarial system. At its essence, it required 5 main players.
The judge.
Presided over trials, decided punishments. The robe was worn in order to leave something to the imagination.
The prosecutor.
Was interested in only 2 things, justice and keeping her conviction percentage high, not in that order.
The defense attorney.
One of the 5% of law school graduates who actually used his degree to help people, or to subvert society from within, depending on who you asked.
The scumbag.
Knew if she kept her pretty little trap shut, those saps on the jury would let her off.
The jury.
12 angry people, each with assigned roles. Number 8, the lone dissenter. Number 10, the racist. Number 3, the lonely retiree who never ever wants the trial to end.
Incarceration.
One of our core beliefs was that criminals could be rehabilitated by locking them up with other criminals in dehumanizing conditions. In retrospect, we believed a lot of crazy shit.
Customs and manners.
Not every law was written down. Customs and manners were informal but powerful checks on human behavior. Etiquette varied between socioeconomic classes, leading to countless fancy parties being spoiled by uncouth boors who, for instance, complained that the steak still had marks where the jockey had whipped. Manners also changed over time, leading some older people to complain about kids these days when they spotted younger humans mixing racially.
Basic toilet etiquette was fairly standard throughout the world. Seat left down, acceptable. Seat left up, disrespectful. Seat left down with turd in the bowl, totally uncool.
War.
Once humans organized into a society, we immediately noticed that other humans had also organized into completely different societies, and we were compelled to attack them. Violent conflict between societies was called war, and was one of the few universal constants of human existence. We waged war to acquire land or possessions from others, to retaliate for their attempts to acquire land or possessions from us, or because it was Tuesday. Most world religions denounced war as a barbaric waste of human life. We treasured the teachings of these religions so dearly that we frequently had to wage war in order to impose them on other people.
In the ruins. Landmines.
Some hundreds of thousands of these explosive, no trespassing signs still dot the landscape. A few of them are probably still active, and we kind of forgot where we put most of them. Long story short, steer clear of Asia.
The Geneva Convention.
The Geneva Convention, first formulated in Zurich in 1929, clarified what wartime atrocities were a little much, even for us.
When showering a city with incendiary bombs, hospitals are off limits. Only buildings housing healthy people may be incinerated by chemicals burning at 4,000 degrees. After blowing off your enemy's feet with a landmine, you are not permitted to attach electrodes to his stumps for the purposes of extracting information. You can't wear a uniform covered in fake blood, then jump up and start killing people. You may not shoot members of the Red Cross, not even a little, nor prevent them from inspecting your prisons, nor touch their property, nor leave live hand grenades in their medical kits, nor get fresh with their nurses, nor fling dead rats at them for a laugh, nor look, just stay the fuck away from the Red Cross, okay?
FAQs. Future alien questions.
How did the police know if criminals were lying?
Well, they used a device that was known as a lie detector, which involved measuring the suspect's heart rate while they punched him until he confessed.
How was anyone supposed to remember all your ridiculously arbitrary rules of etiquette?
Well, the shameful memory of being ostracized from polite society was usually enough to remind people which fork to use when eating shrimp.
Why did humans spend so much time worrying what others thought about them?
Why? Well, what do you mean by that? Does it make us look needy? Because we didn't care what anyone else thought. Did that sound cool when I said that? Oh, God, I hope I sounded cool.
Was communism ever successful?
No, successful is really a relative term. If your needs were met by bread and toilet paper, then yes. As long as you weren't in a hurry.
Tribes, villages, towns, cities. Which was the best place to live?
Well, each living arrangement did have its charm, so it would be reductive to single out one type of locale as saying better or worse than the other, or to suggest, for instance, that the real citizens of a given country lived only in small towns. But as a general rule, the best place to live, whether within a tiny hamlet or a giant city, was in a rich person's house.
How did countries strike the balance between governmental control and personal liberty?
Well, each country would, over time, reach its own equilibrium point, after which even the most minute adjustments to the status quo would be greeted with competing cries of fascism and socialism.
What was the best system of government?
While it had its flaws, democracy was the finest and most just system of government, provided that the party one supported was in power. If the party one opposed was in power, however, democracy was a horrible mistake, forcing citizens to live by the hideous whims of the tyrannical, brainwashed, submoronic majority.
It seems like, under your legal systems, it was possible that sometimes the guilty would go free, or the innocent would be convicted of crimes they didn't commit.
Yeah, what's your question?
Was it worse for an innocent man to be sent to prison, or a guilty man to go free?
Well, if the man was innocent anyway, it's not like he was going to do any harm in prison.
If ridding the earth of war and strife was a goal, why wasn't the entire globe under a single government?
Yeah, good question, fascist.
Chapter 6. Commerce.
First, let us congratulate you on reaching this chapter. We know you've got a lot of audiobook choices, and we appreciate your business. Here at the chapter on commerce, we pride ourselves on delivering the kind of state-of-the-art, ready-to-hear, sentence-based wordperience that other chapters talk about but rarely provide. We hope you enjoy your time here. This is Lou. I'll be happy to take you through the rest of the chapter and answer any questions you might have. Thanks again, and if you need anything, don't feel shy. Lou here's the best. Lou?
Thanks, Bill. Hey, nice to meet you. First time in Chapcom? You're gonna love it. Anywho, where would you like to begin? Now, I could sit here and pretend like some chapters have that we can fully and accurately represent the entire history of man's commercial endeavors over the next half hour or so. But, and believe me, I could lose my job for saying this, we can't. And if anyone tells you they can, they're a liar and you're a fool for believing it. As a matter of fact, if you're that kind of listener, you know what? This chapter's not for you. Well, why don't you head on over to culture or science with the other balloon heads? There. I knew you'd stay. You know how I know? Because I know. I've been doing this a long time, my friend. First time I saw you, I said to myself, this ain't no tourist looking to pass some time on a bowel break. I got me a listener. Hell, I spotted you before you would finish the FAQ section of the Society chapter. So what'll it be? A straightforward overview of supply and demand's effect on the basic exchange of goods and services? A subtle whitewashing of exploitation and slavery vis-a-vis the success of colonial economies and the devastating human toll? Keynes versus Smith, a helpful comparative? You know what? Forget that stuff for now. You strike me as more of an evolution over time type. Yeah, Well, you're in the right chapter. Feel free to just browse around. Sure. If you need anything, I'll be here in the opening essay. It was nice meeting you, asshole.
Trade.
One did not always possess everything that one needed to survive and prosper. And just taking these things from other people led to some fights, feuds, and some socially awkward genocides. So eventually we worked out ways of exchanging goods and services called trading. It left both parties, if not quite happy, a little bit less homicidal.
History of trading.
At first, only expensive luxury items, such as silk, spices, and slaves, were really cost-effective to trade across long distances. Over time, improved modes of transportation, such as carts, boats, and slaves, eased travel, enabling us to profitably trade goods of much shoddier quality. In the Dark Ages, trade was limited to goods produced locally. A Gaul who needed to borrow some pepper would have had to wait about 30 years. This made it not worth it to all but the most dedicated foodies. In the 1700s, global trade took off with the advent of large ships, reliable navigational equipment, and monarchs with a good deal of coffer space. Merchants sought regions whose wealth of resources and lack of guns made them ideal trading partners. By 2010, America had become the leading exporter of androgynous performers, with China handling pretty much everything else. The essence of commerce can be understood through a few key concepts.
Supply and demand.
The market's iron guiding principle is the law of supply and demand, which stated that an item's value derived purely from its scarcity and how much people wanted it. Irrelevant factors included the item's utility, quality, storage requirements, what your wife will say, and whether there was any good reason at all to spend $3,100 on the only authenticated pair of ears Leonard Nimoy wore while filming Star Trek VI.
Buy low, sell high.
There was no commercial principle more elementary than that it was good to sell a thing for more money than you bought it for. Doing so produced a profit and meant you were incredibly smart. Failure to do so produced a loss and meant your broker was an idiot.
Location, location, location.
When choosing where to live or do business, one thing mattered so much that everyone always said it 3 times. Of course, the description of a property mattered as well. Early agents found buyers responded better to near fresh water source than malarial swamp adjacent.
It's not personal, it's just business.
We considered actions taken in a commercial context to be morally distinct from other actions. Social norms, such as compassion and integrity, otherwise highly valued, simply did not apply to trade.
Economics.
Economics arose as a way to explain the behavior of markets. It became known as the dismal science because it couldn't compete with the pure joie de vivre of particle physics or metallurgy. By the early 21st century, we'd gotten so good at economics that advanced nations only suffered major financial collapses twice every decade or so.
Our 4 most important economic thinkers. Adam Smith, 1723 to 1790.
For most of our history, we naively believed it was sometimes good to put our fellow man's well-being ahead of our own. Adam Smith called bullshit on that, showing that pursuing self-interest, free market capitalism, was itself the highest form of altruism. Smith believed markets were guided by an invisible hand that scuttled around under people's beds waiting to rationally allocate resources. Governments should avoid trying to control this creepy hand, Smith said, as doing so would only make it mad.
Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883.
In Das Kapital, German for the capital, Karl Marx theorized that when a small group of property owners exploited a much larger number of workers, the workers would inevitably revolt, seize control of the means of production, and build a proletarian communist paradise. This bold prediction remained on the verge of coming true for 140 years.
John Maynard Keynes, 1883 to 1946.
John Maynard Keynes countered Smith, asserting that governments could correct a free market's occasionally errant course by manipulating levels of public spending and interest rates, much as one might steer a Ferrari by alternately yanking and pushing two levers in the trunk. Keynesianism is credited with ending the Great Depression, but in later decades faced opposition from the sorts of people whom the Great Depression didn't hurt anyway.
Charles Ponzi, 1882 to 1949.
Like his contemporary Albert Einstein, Charles Ponzi unlocked an explosive equation. Belief equals wealth. If enough investors believed a scheme would make money, it would. The trick was perpetually finding enough new investors to pay off the old ones, a figure Ponzi estimated at 6 infinity. While Ponzi schemes inevitably failed, his revered principles were central to such successful 21st century markets as real estate, tech stocks, and everything else.
The middleman.
Nearly all transactions involved one or more intermediaries. They could facilitate deals for a cut of the final price. The chief duty of these middlemen was to ensure buyers and sellers could never simply just talk to each other directly, like human beings.
The black market.
Some goods and services were difficult or impossible to obtain due to scarcity, taxes and tariffs, and or the ethical strictures of our respective societies. One man's loyal companion was another's indentured servant. Naturally, these unavailable or banned items were very highly sought after. It was precisely because endangered white tiger brains wouldn't chill and serve themselves that illicit black markets sprung up to deliver the most difficult and or odious products. Black markets are, of course, not to be confused with markets for black people, which we also had.
Money.
You want to know us? I mean, really know us? Money is what we fought, killed, and died for. Sometimes we even worked for it. It was money. To the untrained eye, it looks like odd bits of paper and metal, but it made the world go round. We parted it from fools, even though it burned holes in our pockets and couldn't buy us happiness or love. It was the root of all evil, but we took it and ran. Smart, seed, serious, easy, earned, funny, found, front, good after bad, mad, cash, old, new, blood, honest, even, real, and hush. We weren't made of it, but we followed it. Why? Because it took money to make money, and it sure didn't grow on trees. Anyway, you guys can have it if you want.
Work.
For society to flourish, it would take work. So what was work? Tasks we performed for compensation in the service of an employer, be it an individual or corporate entity. And yes, it was as exciting as it sounds. We didn't want to work. In fact, that's about as good a definition of work as you could have. That which we didn't want to do, but had to if we didn't want to eat dirt. Of course, some workers attacked their jobs with passion and creativity. These people were known as brown-nosing jagoffs.
Growing things.
The practice of cultivating crops, or agriculture, enabled man to feed thousands of people living in a relatively small area, meaning that finally we could put away the tents and bows and arrows and start shoveling acres of manure. Millennia later, mechanized farm equipment, man-made fertilizers, and genetic engineering allowed us to end the scourge of human hunger once and for all. I'm just kidding. Towards the end, we inevitably experienced a trend back towards the organic farming of yesteryear, but this proved to be little more than the pipe dreams of wealthy elitists whose children were for some reason plagued by countless undocumented food allergies.
Making things.
All the things you're finding that aren't plants, rocks, or other animals, we made those. From aluminum foil to Zithromax, diapers to dioxin, our clever brains and agile hands conspired to manufacture things to make our lives more bearable. Early man lovingly handcrafted these items with care, skill, and soul. Luckily, mass production came along to end all that.
Doing things.
If you were not making or growing things, you were part of our other vast work sector, the service industries. There were financial services, food services, customer, administration, medical, and tech services. There were services that placed individuals into other service jobs and services to complain about the lack of service you had been receiving from the aforementioned services. You would think any such well-serviced society would be happy and satisfied. You never spend 3 hours being passed back and forth between an automated response menu and a persnickety 22-year-old Calcuttan named Chuck. Just tell me how to activate my goddamn cell phone, Chuck, and no, don't send me back to the machine lady. Jesus fucking Christ! Chuck!
Buying and selling.
All of Earth's organisms were consumers, in that to survive they required and obtained inputs from the outside world. But where a plant needed nothing but sunlight, water, and CO2, man required Dairy Queen blizzards, rhinestone blackberry covers, and timeshare condos in Cabo. Somehow, the species that stood atop the evolutionary ladder defined itself less by sophistication of thought and action than by stuff. Specifically, the relentless pursuit of more, and whether you knew someone who could get it for you wholesale. We could turn any national observance into a commercial opportunity.
Come to the Mattress Shack. New and pre-owned mattresses. Holocaust Remembrance Day sales event. Ellie Wiesel says, you'll never forget the savings.
Even sophisticated consumers like humans weren't always sure which product they had to have. Advertising answered the question, informing potential customers which goods would, if bypassed, render one too boring, stupid, hairy, or generally unfuckable to go on living. As people acclimated to any given sales technique, advertisers grew both more and less subtle, finding deft ways of incorporating their message into our daily lives. We went from being exposed to 1 or 2 ads a day in 1900 to 5,000 a day in 2010. It wasn't easy for the human brain to process this quantity of information, but we found space for it in the cranial regions formerly occupied by our capacity for introspection, wonder, and, of course, joy.
Nailed it. Vending machines.
Modern-day transactions could be complicated to the point of inconvenience. Vending machines were a much-loved antidote, facilitating a straight, mechanical exchange of cash for soda, candy, lottery tickets, tampons, or soiled schoolgirl panties. They operated 24 hours a day and without any judgment from the snobbish Mobile Mart clerks who normally kept us in our place.
Corporations.
While individuals could provide relatively simple goods and services, more complex ones required a coordinated group effort. The name for such a group was a corporation, an independent legal entity built by and composed of humans that was granted some of the intrinsic rights of humans, but without having to be weighed down by their responsibilities or sense of morality. Of course, any corporation that did behave immorally would be immediately disciplined by market forces. In the event such a firm chose to continue down a less than righteous path, they would be shunned and cast out of the family of man.
The last 2 sentences were brought to you by and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sarcasm Company. The Sarcasm Company, doing their sincere best since 1936.
For years, corporatees, the specialized dialect spoken by highly paid executives to obscure their job's relative simplicity, was incomprehensible to linguists and laymen alike. That changed with the 2003 discovery of the Rosetta Memo behind a filing cabinet in an Atlanta office park.
It is my understanding that some team members are experiencing a non-satisfactory level of disconnect vis-a-vis our interpersonnel messaging. To ensure we're all on the same page with our ducks in a row, we're opening the kimono to initiate a global refresh on F2F and e-communication standards. Therefore, FYI, FFR, interface, dialogue, touch base, face-to-face, connect, and advise indicate interpersonal communication. Execute, implement, leverage, facilitate, synergize, deliver, and exploit pertain to the performance of work. Robust, value-rich, seamless, best-of-breed, and user-centric denote meritorious quality. Further, to heighten our task simplicity quotient, the revealing of which could result in significant new awareness of human capital redundancy and attendant downsizing, all comms should, going forward, be both redundant and repetitive, with the occasional wordvention utilized in place of vocables of greater brevity, clarity, and brevarity. Augment with occasional impenetrable acronyms, OIAs. These syntactical enhancements add perceived value to each employee's personal brand. Exemplifications are underposted. 1. I want to circle back an interface about how to right-size our headcount while still keeping workers incentivized. 2. Due to unforeseen life events, I'll be offline tomorrow, so can we push our interlock until post all hands? 3. At the end of the day, net, if we have a joint brown bag to come to agreements on how to grow mindshare among targeted thought leaders by implementing best practices across the board, we can marketeer our way towards synergizing a frictionless sales environment.
Translation of the memo.
Hey, dumb shits. 90% of the stuff we say basically means either talk, make, or good. But nobody pays fat salaries for talking about making good things. So to keep our scam going, only use ungainly words and always 3 times as many of them as a normal person. Like you just heard, 1. Let's discuss how we can fire people without making the ones we keep cry. 2. My uncle died. Can we meet later? 3. Lunch?
Money we didn't have.
With the invention of money, several new problems emerged. Those who had more money than they needed required a place to keep it. And those who needed more money than they had required a place to borrow some. And those who loved money so much they didn't know what to do with themselves required a place to work. With characteristic enterprise, we created one solution to all these problems. Banks.
After customers deposited their money, it could be locked in a big vault for safekeeping. More commonly, the bank loaned your money to someone who needed it to buy a house, start a business, or pay off another loan. To meet expenses, i.e. pay bonuses, banks could also take small fees, though not nearly as small as the fine print explaining that they could do so. Your money might get invested in sound business opportunities your bank deemed worthy of money that wasn't theirs. Of course, there was always a chance someone would just come and take your money. Part of your money could go to burnishing your bank's image, for instance, by sponsoring professional sports. Because overpriced beer and nightmarish parking were positive associations compared to bank. In the end, you could withdraw your funds, minus one last ATM fee to cover expenses. It's not like the banks were made of money.
Investing.
People lucky enough to have more money than they needed for survival were faced with the decision of how to handle the surplus. Many used this extra money to buy assets in the hope their value would rise over time. Such investments could be low risk, bank or mattress deposits, or high risk, loaning one's brother-in-law $1,000 to market the Bowflex ripoff he designed one night in his basement. The skilled investor had to balance the potential reward of great profits and short-lived joy against the risk of loss and permanent sadness. This is why the very best investors were unfeeling sociopaths.
The stock market.
Public companies' values were constantly changing based on rigorous macro and microeconomic data, plus rumors, gossip, and whether it was a summer Friday and traders wanted to beat the traffic out to Quag. Though many so-called analysts pretended to understand these fluctuations, these same people's predictions often proved less accurate than those of a monkey throwing darts at the Wall Street Journal, or in later years, wallstreetjournal.com.
Manias, booms, and busts.
Although our modern economy was completely terrific, it did have a tendency to destroy itself every 10 to 15 years. This was because our instinctive greed drove us regularly insane. The thing we went insane about varied. Technology stocks in the 1990s, tulip bulbs in 17th century Holland. These patently irrational obsessions went in cycles everyone knew about and almost everyone ignored anyway. The pattern, as more people invested in thing X, its price rose, drawing more people to invest in thing X. The cycle escalated until something happened to remind everyone that their investment thesis in no way mirrored reality. The bubbles burst, clearing the way for us to make the same mistake, but different, a little bit later.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
Johnny has $89 and Billy has $2.05. How much more does Johnny have than Billy?
Well, we considered comparisons of net worth tacky. Anyway, it almost sounds as if you're trying to incite class warfare.
What was the most effective form of advertising?
Well, forcing someone to buy your product at gunpoint equaled guaranteed sales. Unfortunately, as of this writing, it had been outlawed in every country except Brazil and Ireland.
The Acme Company appears to have made low-quality products. How did they stay in business?
Free shipping to remote desert locations.
Could money buy happiness?
No, of course not. But it could buy a 60-inch 1080p LCD with NFL Weekend Pass, which was pretty much indistinguishable from happiness.
Which service jobs particularly lent themselves to spur-of-the-moment sexual liaisons?
Great question. Pizza delivery men were notorious for ravaging their female clients, as were sweaty gardeners, dampened pool boys, and the occasional pantsless window washer. When it came to neck-deepedness in wealthy middle-aged nook, you had to go with country club tennis pro. They couldn't even get the job without references from at least 5 clients they were already banging behind their husbands' backs.
Imagine fresh fruit juice in your own home for a fraction of what you'd spend at the health food store. How much would you pay for that?
$39.99.
What if I told you you could also make zesty salsa?
$49.99.
And perfect guacamole. And cleanup is a breeze.
All right, well, just give me all the information first, and then let us guess.
You had the word Trump on many of your buildings. What did that word mean?
A Trump was a demon who sometimes appeared to us in quasi-human form in order to fire us from a job we never wanted in the first place.
It appears many industrialized countries had very few actual factories. Why?
Well, we realized most products could be made more cheaply elsewhere.
So then, what did people in industrialized countries do?
Well, we ran the companies that made the things, brand strategy, marketing, supply chain, management, that sort of thing.
So you just told other people what to make, and then took the profits?
Nah, it's a 10-4.
What was to keep other countries from figuring out they could pretty much do all of this themselves?
We tried not to think about that.
One last question. Where do you get off wasting the time of a dedicated salesman who was only trying to provide the service you...
Let it go, Lou.
Chapter 7. Religion.
As the smartest and most evolved creatures on Earth, humans had it pretty good. Our position atop the food chain kept us fat and happy. Mineral resources abounded and public restrooms dotted the landscape. But being human did carry with it one terrible burden: awareness. This awareness led us to some difficult realizations that never seemed to occur to dolphins or collies. Realizations like, we die. Dolphins and collies were 2 of our most communicative animal brethren and would often warn us of trouble, whether it be down at the mill or out past the old shipwreck on Breaker's Point. Humans seemed to be the only creature that realized life did not last forever, that everyone, every living thing, even famous celebrities like television and film star George Clooney, eventually died. The thought that we would one day cease to exist, all our passions and hatred subsumed by nothingness, was, as the noted philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, a total mindfuck. The knowledge of our eventual demise presented 2 options. A, find comfort in life as a transitory and purposeless sideshow, or B, find comfort in death as a doorway to a far richer and fulfilling state of being. We mostly went with B. We called it religion. Religion usually centered on an omnipotent being or beings known as God. Gods, or for reasons too tedious to get into here, G-D. These beings were responsible for all the mysteries of life, and loyal service to them assured an eternal life in their protection and glory. Life suddenly had meaning. We weren't a chance collection of organisms careening aimlessly through the universe. We were created for a purpose, to show our appreciation for being created. The earth, the heavens, night, rain, God created them all so that we would have a nice place to worship, exalt, praise, honor, and generally kiss the ass of the one who made it all possible. Narcissistic? Not if you can back it up. And religion proved not only an existential salve, but a practical one. Religious doctrine provided very specific, step-by-step instruction on almost every aspect of life, from dress to morality to diet. Should I eat this pork chop? No. Cover my head? Sure. Can I have an oyster? For crying out loud, just order the chicken. provided, of course, it's been killed with one cut to the throat. 1. I'm mad at my neighbor. May I poke out his eye? Only if he poked out yours. Religion rendered the world simple and appealed to peasant and aristocrat alike. Peasants took comfort that their suffering in this world was merely a golden ladder to eternal justice and plenty. Aristocrats took comfort that the peasants who believed that were less likely to foment bloodshed against aristocrats. So for a while there, the whole God thing was really working well for us. But there was one problem. We agreed religious dogma was the inerrant word of God. We just couldn't agree on which God, or even agree to disagree on which God. So minor disagreements on diet and wardrobe became centuries-long battles to the death. It turned out that killing a person was hard, but killing an infidel, easy, even rewarding. And an infidel was simply someone who maybe disagreed that Jesus was the actual Son of God, or that one must pray 5 times daily, or that anyone could eat matzah for 8 straight days without becoming irregular. Thus, religion helped overcome man's catastrophic tendency towards neighborliness and smoothed the way for millennia of wars, allowing millions of people to discover firsthand whether or not their religion was right about the whole post-death non-oblivion thing. So to sum up, religion provided great comfort to a world torn apart by religion.
Polytheism.
Polytheism had much to offer early civilizations, exciting characters, lots of holidays, plenty of good old-fashioned animal sacrifice. It also explained the origins of man and the various mysteries of life with rivetingly implausible stories. The gods that made up a particular polytheistic religion were referred to as a pantheon. The stories of a particular pantheon together created a mythology, the name we gave to every collection of crazy nonsense stories besides our own.
Monotheism.
As the millennia flew by and man grew ever more sophisticated, the idea that the world was controlled by a caste of invisible, emotionally unstable supernatural beings grew laughable. Instead, the world was actually controlled by one all-powerful, invisible, emotionally unstable supernatural being, known hereafter as God. God loved man. All that he asked in return was that man acknowledge his singularity and return his love. The lure of monotheism over polytheism was clear. Exalt this all-powerful being in whose image you were created, or sit around and wait for the god of thunder to get bored, disguise himself as a bull, and come fuck you in the ass for no good reason.
Judaism.
The oldest of the monotheistic religions, Judaism is based on the ancient covenant between God and a Middle Eastern shepherd named Abraham. To test Abraham's faith, God commanded him to slit the throat of his son Isaac. Abraham, a real team player, agreed, but at the last second, God had him sacrifice a ram instead. To commemorate this event, all Jewish males have their foreskins cut off at a catered brunch on their 8th day of life. Abraham's devotion earned the Jews the title of God's chosen people, and nothing bad ever happened to them again.
And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And yea, did he hear tittering from on high, for the Lord was richly amused. And he came down in a cloud of thunder, saying, O thou shouldst see the look on thy face. And Abraham threw down his knife in great confusion, saying, Wouldst thou truly have had me extinguish my beloved son? And he wept with anguish. And the Lord said, Surely thou art awestruck in the fullness of thy punking. But Abraham would not be consoled.
Christianity.
The second oldest monotheistic religion, Christianity, is based on the Old Testament belief that the God of Abraham prophesied a Messiah. Christians believe that this Messiah was Jesus of Nazareth. A carpenter by trade, Jesus spread wisdom and compassion throughout the land, which back then was the kind of thing that could get a fella killed. Jesus was nailed to a wooden cross, then rose from the dead 3 days later. It's this part of the story, the rising from the dead part, that really gave his teachings what we called legs. Jews agreed that Jesus lived, but disputed that he was the Messiah. But we all know how much they like to argue.
And Jesus said, Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. And Simon Peter was so curious and cried, "Lord, does that mean we should pick up poisonous snakes in church and shake them around?" So Jesus said, "Sure, go ahead," and his sarcasm was palpable. But when Jesus saw the disciples were writing his words down, he said, "Wait, don't do that." But Simon Peter said, "Too late." And the youngest disciple was already running around, wreathed in cobras, crying, "Look at me, I'm holy." And though Jesus swore up and down he was joking, the disciples would hear him not. Jesus mourned in spirit, but after a while, even he had to see the humor in the situation. And after they had buried the youngest disciple, Jesus and his followers met a chick named Martha.
Christianity was split in two in 1517, when a dissident priest named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses, a list of complaints about Catholic practice, to the door of a German church. Within hours, William Donahue of the Catholic League had issued a press release calling for an apology and a boycott.
Islam.
Islam is the youngest of the Abrahamic religions, and no discussion of its tenets can start without first stating its peaceful nature. It cannot be stressed enough how peaceful this religion was. If you're looking for a belief system that can be twisted to support a violent extremist ideology, you have come to the wrong place, mister. Islam was a beautiful, harmless, happy daffodil that blossomed in the desert. It was based on devotion to Allah, who revealed his words to the Prophet Muhammad. These teachings form the basis of the Quran, the sacred text of this beautiful and let me state once again, very, very peaceful religion. Well, you get what I'm saying.
Things we liked. Inerrant texts.
Our faiths were bolstered by inerrant, infallible, divinely revealed holy books that were perfect down to the last jot and tittle. And if new scholarship proved that the universe wasn't actually created in 7 days, well, screw you too. We believed, and that was enough.
The Old Testament. Venerated by Jews, Christians who didn't like homosexuals. Who wrote it? God, Moses, various prophets. Who actually wrote it? Babylonians who loved genealogy but hated shellfish. Main themes. There is only one God, and he's pissed. Questionable claim? Pick any page and you'll find 3. Okay to burn? No.
The New Testament. Venerated by Christians, presidential candidates. Who wrote it? Jesus' disciples. Who actually wrote it? Some guys who knew some other guys who said they knew Jesus. Main themes: God loves you, so believe in him or go to hell. Questionable claim: the meek shall inherit the earth. Okay to burn? No.
The Quran. Venerated by Muslims, American prison inmates. Who wrote it? Allah, via the angel Jibreel, via Muhammad. Who actually wrote it? We're not going to touch this one. Main themes: holiness of the Quran, correctness of the Quran, infallibility of the Quran, handsomeness of the Quran's typeface, excellence of the Quran's binding, Quraniness of the Quran. Questionable claim: heaven is a cat house full of virgins. Okay to burn? It's not even okay to ask.
The 2010 World Almanac. Venerated by people who still hadn't discovered the internet. Who wrote it? A staff of PhDs in New York City. Who actually wrote it? An intern with last year's almanac and access to Wikipedia. Main themes: humanity's compulsive need to catalogue. Questionable claim: somebody, somewhere, cares when Vivian Vance was born. Okay to burn? Yeah, knock yourself out.
Other religions.
Some religions didn't fit neatly into the mono or poly model of theism. Many of these religions felt instead that the highest form of religious expression was perfection of the self. One of these religions thought the self was covered with the souls of invisible people who had gotten blown up in a volcano. This is usually when the Buddha would yawn and remark on how late it was getting.
Taoism.
Taoism was a loosely organized set of religious beliefs originating among Chinese peasants that taught the best way to find inner peace was Wu Wei, literally, action without action. In practice, this meant moving as little as possible, which proved a popular choice amongst impoverished people subsisting on 600 calories a day anyway.
Buddhism.
Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, an Indian prince who traveled around teaching that to end human suffering, one must end craving through silent meditation. As you can imagine, he did an awful lot of shushing.
Scientology.
Like many religions, the Church of Scientology was incorporated in New Jersey in 1953. Its highest-level practitioners learned that Earth's problems began when Xenu, evil ruler of the Galactic Confederacy, brought billions of humans to Earth 75 million years ago and killed them with hydrogen bombs. This information was kept hidden from non-Scientologists, as learning it before years of costly preparation could induce involuntary physical responses, including but not limited to laughter, eye-rolling, and exclamations of, "Are you serious?"
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The LDS, or Mormonism, was founded in 19th century upstate New York by a gentleman named Joe Smith. No lie, Joe Smith. Smith and his followers were eventually chased to Utah, where he set up a polygamist utopia. Smith never actually thought of himself as a polygamist, preferring to think of himself as in love with being in love.
Prayer.
Divine beings had thousands of ways of communicating with us. A lightning bolt, a rainbow, or a cameo appearance on a piece of toast. But our only way of communicating with them was through prayer, which we used sparingly, only in cases when we wanted something. Now, that something could be anything from forgiveness, health for ourselves or others, wealth for ourselves, vengeance for others, and the strength to survive the latest ordeal he had perpetrated. Prayers were often organized as part of the routine of daily life, but they could also be uttered spontaneously, as in the event of catastrophic engine failure. Were our prayers answered? Always. Although the answer was often no. But that was all right, because the act of prayer was cathartic in itself. It was like talking to your old grandfather. You knew he couldn't hear you, and you couldn't forget the horrible things he'd done to you, but you loved him, and it still felt good to say this stuff out loud.
Typical prayers. Protestantism.
Thank you for making the restrictions on TARP money non-binding.
Judaism.
Please protect me from violent pogroms / offensive stereotypes / negative reviews of my new Broadway show or novel / negligence lawsuits from my podiatry practice.
Catholicism.
Please, Donna, let them take my Johnny away. He's such a good boy. He wouldn't know steal a car like they say, not my Johnny.
Islam.
Please, let me see a lawyer. I don't know why I'm here.
Scientology.
Please, Ron, I really need this part. And also, if you could help me be a little less gay, that'd be great.
Wicca.
Goddess, please use your eternal powerness to make those bitches on the pep squad stop picking on me.
Reform Judaism.
You know, if I leave now, I can make it home in time for Friday Night Lights.
Nailed it. Stained glass.
Stained glass did more than just colourfully fill out a window that didn't open. The dazzling play of sunlight in its thousands of polychrome fragments were beautiful enough to move even those of us who thought the events depicted were literally unbelievable. They were a bitch to clean, though.
Sin and penitence.
Many religions shared the concept of sin, a thought or act, usually involving orifices, that violated God's moral code. Some of it was original sin, but most of it was plagiarized. Sinners faced punishments ranging from an eternity of damnation to a few minutes in a dark booth next to an old man with wafer breath. Mankind was, in the phrase of one famous group of theologians, naughty by nature. But through the process of penitence, sinners could wipe the slate clean, until a few hours later when temptation once again led them to befoul that slate with profanity and or semen.
The 7 deadly sins.
Although these sins were technically only fatal to our souls, they could still kill our bodies if left unchecked.
Greed.
Although I am already the world's richest man, I simply cannot live without that giant diamond that mother bear is using as a pillow for her cubs.
Lust.
I'm so horny I'm gonna fuck that shark.
Sloth. Gluttony.
I'll have one meat lover's pizza, one taco lover's steak, and one pizza lover's taco. Hurry.
Pride.
After this battle, the name Custer will be synonymous with tactical genius.
Envy.
Marcy got an iPod when she broke her arm. Let's see what I get when I get hit by this car.
Anger.
Demoted back to letter carrier. Demoted back to letter carrier? Fuck you!
Confessionals.
The first step in repentance was confessing our sins to God, which we did freely, because he already knew about them anyway. Some religions required this message to go through a middleman, who could better make your case for you because he wasn't as hateful in God's eyes. Imagine if you found out that the guy you were confessing your sins to was actually into way more twisted shit than even you were. That would have been weird, huh? Anyway, confessionals were a private moment between person and confessor. The stenographer was there for insurance purposes.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 6 years since my last confession.
Go ahead, my child.
I took the Lord's name in vain.
An all too common sin, I'm afraid.
Normally I wouldn't, but it was just after I hit someone with my car.
I see. Was this person you hit injured?
I don't know. I drove away without stopping to check.
You didn't stop?
Yeah. Is that a sin?
Yes, that's a terrible sin.
Does it make it worse if it's a cop?
Wait, you hit a cop?
I can't be sure. I was going really fast when I hit him. Is speeding a sin?
Speeding's kind of beside the point here.
Well, that's a relief.
Did you call the hospital at least?
I haven't really had time. It happened like 3 minutes ago.
3 minutes? You just ran over a cop and the first thing you did is go to confession?
Why? Is going to confession a sin?
No, of course not, but...
Hey, I'm not as bad as I thought.
Okay, I'm not sure you want to be telling me this. You need to go to the police immediately.
No way. They put me in jail. But you've just got to take it, right?
Yes, I am bound to silence, but surely...
Besides, even if the cop lived, they'd probably want to put me in jail for stealing the world's largest diamond, which is what I was driving away from when I hit the cop. Father, are you there?
You stole the world's largest diamond.
Is that a sin?
Yes! Yes, that's a sin!
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I didn't kill anyone to get it.
Well, I guess that's something.
I need to confess another thing. I also lied, Father.
That's kind of inconsequential at this...
It was when I told you I didn't kill anyone to get that diamond. Man, it feels so good to get that off my chest.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Heaven.
Given how easy and fun earthly sinning could be, you'd think that our vision of heaven would have to dazzle us. However, the furthest our collective imaginations got was that heaven was white, well-maintained, and looked a little bit like the clean room in a hospital burn ward. Best we could tell, heaven was a place where you and everyone you'd ever known did happy things to harp music, something you never would have been caught dead listening to when you were alive.
Hell.
Hell was a fiery Stygian pit of endless suffering, punctuated by noxious odors, bubbling semen, and unrelenting muzak. You earned this fate by either A, being bad, or B, being good but worshipping the wrong god, or C, being good and worshipping the right god but neglecting some other fundamental sacrament you didn't even know existed, like you're not supposed to get married on a Tuesday.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
Wasn't the vast number of religions, each claiming to be the one true one, a tip-off that the phenomenon of religion was more a collective neurosis than a metaphysical observation?
No.
Was there really a doggy heaven?
No. There was, however, a doggy hell.
Jews, Christians, and Muslims all had a holy book. What about Hindus?
Well, the Hindus had many sacred scriptures. The most important was the Kama Sutra, which taught enlightenment through yogic techniques such as the reverse cowboy and the Calcutta steamer.
We were surprised you devoted so much time to Judaism, since it made up only 1/5 of 1% of the world's people.
Wait, what do you mean?
It just seemed disproportionate.
Oh, well. Sorry you had a problem with all the stuff about the Jews.
We didn't have a problem with them.
Really? Because it sounds like you had a problem with them.
No. In fact, some of our favorite things in the chapter were Jewish.
Oh, good. Good for you.
Can we move on?
Hey, your questions. Do what you like.
Was Buddha really fat or really skinny? There seems to be evidence for both.
Well, he started out thin, and then once he achieved enlightenment, he kind of let himself go.
Why did bad things happen to good people?
We did not know. But we did know it was presumptuous for human beings to attempt to comprehend providence, or the mysterious motivations behind every aspect of the divine plan.
Why did bad things happen to bad people?
That was divine justice.
You say the Pope was the head of the Catholic Church, yet we're finding many records of people inquiring whether he was even Catholic.
Is the Pope Catholic? That was actually a sarcastic way of letting someone know the answer to the question they just asked is yes.
Chapter 8. Science.
As we saw in the last chapter, the fear of death and the terrifying uncertainty of existence prompted early man to seek comfort, or at least assurance in the supernatural. Who created us? How does the sun travel through the sky? Why does it burn when I urinate? For millennia, the respective answers to those questions were invisible cloud men, starboats, and you really must have angered the invisible cloud men. But eventually, the nerds of our higher intelligence grew tired of being bullied by the theta chis of faith and decided to fight back. Rationality bulked itself up through a rigorous training regimen of experimentation, observation, and critical thinking known as science. Emboldened, it began offering its own explanations for things. We were not created by invisible cloud men, but through an intricate evolutionary process. The sun's travels were actually a perpetual reflection of our own planet's movement. And it burned when you pee because you have dick anthrax, and I think we both know why that is. For most of history, science maintained a cordial relationship with religion. Early science was to a large extent astronomy. There was seemingly nothing in the skies that contradicted religion's idea of a higher power. And then came the telescope. Magnification began to reveal uncomfortable truths about the universe and our place in it. Through scientific study, men like Galileo began offering a view of the universe quite incompatible with religious teaching. The question then became, well, who was right? God or Galileo? For fairness' sake, the Pope got to judge. The next 500 years saw great geniuses making discoveries and insights that immeasurably deepened our understanding of the universe, the speeds of light and sound, the theories of evolution and relativity, the laws of gravity, thermodynamics, and attraction. But as wondrous as these findings were, science, pure science, tended to have difficulty expanding beyond its core fan base of 18 to 65-year-old balding, bespectacled males. Luckily, pure science had a friend and patron in its wealthier and better-looking cousin, technology. Technology was the branch of human knowledge by which the theoretical became the practical, and the practical became the obsolete. It proved the ideal conduit for human ingenuity, really kicking in with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, which was different from a real revolution in that it killed millions more people. Whereas religion promised eternal life immediately upon death, technology promised an eternally better life immediately upon obtaining. For example, the Weber Summit S670 propane gas grill with Snapjet burner ignition system. Man, that's a good grill. By 2010, science had positioned itself as religion's arch nemesis. Yet the superficial difference in their methodologies masked a deeper kinship. Like religion, science placed its faith in cosmic forces that were invisible and sounded crazy. Filled with a sense of larger purpose, its high priests often considered themselves above morality and ethics. Its institutions were corporate and bureaucratic and largely dependent on tax exemptions. More importantly, from the semi-automatic rifle to prosthetic limbs, From the deep-sea oil drilling rig to the containment dome, science proved every bit the equal of religion in its ability to almost solve the problems it caused. Religion, at least, didn't suffer from arrogance. Science's case is more tragic. Conceived as a means of controlling the universe, it wound up getting away from us. Our capacity to achieve scientific breakthroughs was exceeded only by our lack of understanding of post-breakthrough realities. The more we played God, the more we began realizing we had perhaps been too critical of him. In the end, God was more than happy to stand aside and let us use the toys we'd built to hasten, if not downright cause, our ultimate demise. Well played, Invisible Cloud Man. Well played.
The scientific method.
Pioneered by ancient Greeks, developed by medieval Muslims, systematized in the Renaissance, perfected in the Enlightenment, and patented by the DuPont Corporation, the scientific method improved on man's previous tradition, making shit up. The scientific method added the crucial step of experimentation, using real-world data to test a hypothesis that, if proven, would be accepted by scientists as a theory, which could then be used to get a grant, or in some cases tenure.
The scientific method in action. Number 1, identify the problem.
In 1854, hundreds of people in London's Soho district suddenly came down with cholera. At first, this was considered a slight improvement on their usual state of dysentery.
Cholera epidemic! 127 dead in 3 days! Survivors flee Soho! Soho lofts now available!
Number 2, research the problem.
Dr. Jon Snow, fresh off the discovery of his eponymous form of precipitation, arrives on the scene to gather information. As his notebooks reveal, his suspicions quickly focus on a public well, known as the Broad Street Pump, oddly close to what were called at the time festering public shitholes.
Number 3, formulate a hypothesis.
As he later recounted, Snow then turned the evidence into a revolutionary new theory.
Having thus gathered the data, I could not help but wonder whether the epidemic was not in some way related to the fact that every one of its sufferers had drunk water absolutely teeming with human shit.
Dr. Jon Snow, on the possible health detriments of consuming massive amounts of human excrement.
Number 4, test the hypothesis.
Snow set out to verify his idea experimentally, pioneering 2 fields, epidemiology and college student income earning.
Attention Oxford students. 30 volunteers wanted quickly for study. 10 to drink from Broad Street Pump, 10 to drink from uncontaminated pump, 10 to eat naught but shit. Last group earns 3 pence extra.
Number 5, analyze the results. Draw a conclusion.
Southwark Waterworks Company, without admitting any prior actionable wrongdoing, now advises the inhabitants of the Soho district not to drink any water which has previously been shattered. We also announce with regret the discontinuation of our popular line of bottled refreshments, cesspit spritzers and night soil nectars.
Turned out I was right. It was the shit.
Dr. Snow once again from his seminal paper on the possible health detriments of consuming massive amounts of human excrement.
Bigger.
Bigger is better. A tiny 3-word expression that completely belied itself. But it reflected a larger truth. We liked things truly large. In fact, bigness as an end in itself was a goal in fields as diverse as engineering, architecture, transportation, gastronomy, weaponry, and shoulder padology. Why? Because it spoke to our soaring ambition to make an enduring mark on the planet. Surely it was this noble impulse, nothing else, that explains all the tall, rock-hard human erections you've discovered thrusting themselves into Earth's virginal skies.
Smaller.
It was a sad but universal fact of human life that any technology, no matter how incredible, eventually came to be seen as cumbersome. For instance, the first cordless telephone inspired awe. 1 year later, using the very same phone could only be seen as an ironic tribute to a time when we were forced to lug around comically giant cordless phones. Nearly every technological advancement in human history was quickly followed by the phrase, "Yeah, that's great, but how am I going to get that on the plane?"
Faster.
Faster was smaller's more demanding technology twin. In less than 100 years, the travel time from New York City to San Francisco was cut from 6 months by horse and foot to just 6 hours by plane. You'd think we would be endlessly grateful for the advancement, yet God forbid the flight gets delayed 40 minutes by fog. Do you people have any idea how to run an airline? No, I will not lower my voice. I am a decent and upstanding citizen, driven to skull-fucking the gate attendant for Continental Airlines because I may or may not miss my cousin's rehearsal dinner in Montecito. Sorry. The only thing that increased more rapidly than the speed of new technology was the speed with which we became irritated at its now relative slowness. Eventually, we developed the capacity to be instantaneously disappointed. This was the final triumph of faster.
In the ruins. Racetracks.
These were outdoor arenas where we would sit on benches for entire steamy afternoons watching cars drive around an oval very, very fast. One's affection, or lack thereof, for this activity was an indicator of whether or not your ancestors owned slaves.
Convenience.
If necessity was the mother of invention, laziness was its drunken stepfather. Man created many contraptions to free up as much of his time as possible. This helped us achieve our life's greatest goal, doing nothing.
Invention, zipper. What it was for, fastening. What it spared us, embarrassment, genital drafts. Freed us to spend more time enjoying urinating next to strangers. Invention, barcode. What it was for, inventory management. What it spared us, having to yell for price checks. Freed us to get high before going to work as cashier. Invention, washer-dryer. What it was for, washing, drying. What it eased, washing-drying. Or drying-washing. Freed us to iron and fold, prepare meal for husband.
Gods of science.
The great men and women of science achieved so much and transformed the world so profoundly that they were eventually able to shed the nerd tag they dealt with since childhood and be accorded a certain grudging respect. Here are all of the famous scientists who ever lived.
Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955.
With his eccentric appearance, German accent, and unbridled passion for Victorian pornography, Albert Einstein was our most cliched scientist. His theories on relativity also made him our most brilliant pure scientist. When he died, us lesser beings sawed open his skull and preserved his brain in a mason jar. Not so fucking smart now, are you, Einstein?
Gregor Mendel, 1822 to 1884.
Gregor Mendel was a monk whose experiments with peas laid the groundwork for the field of genetics. His slightly raunchier experiments with carrots nearly got him kicked out of the seminary.
Isaac Newton, 1643 to 1727.
His classic double album, Newton Comes Alive, sold over 20 million copies, but he's perhaps best remembered as the first to articulate the laws of classical physics, including thermodynamics and gravity.
Thomas Edison, 1847 to 1931.
Edison, our greatest inventor, invented the light bulb, the phonograph, direct current electricity, and the crushing of one's competitors through lawsuits and negative PR campaigns. He exemplifies the applied scientist, the tinkerer, who views knowledge as a means to an end. That end, getting so rich, you no longer care that you're deaf.
Alexander Graham Bell, 1847 to 1922.
Mr. Watson, come here. I want you.
With those historic words, Bell transmitted his voice from one room to the next, thus achieving his dream of inventing a Watson summoner. Months later, he realized it might be put to other uses as well.
Marie Curie, 1867 to 1934.
Marie Curie is a hero? Marie Curie was a scientist who discovered radium. Even though she was a woman, she was an inspiration to women because she did not let obstacles stop her from doing science. Annie Taylor, 11. Marie Curie, A Book Report, 2006.
The Wright Brothers, 1871 to 1948, 1867 to 1912.
Orville and Wilbur Wright were two of the worst bicycle mechanics who ever lived. But in some ways that's not really important, because on December 17, 1903, the brothers fulfilled one of mankind's oldest dreams with the first ever manned flight. It lasted 12 seconds, but took off 50 minutes late due to tower traffic on the tarmac.
Health.
As confident as the human species was that after death a higher power awaited us in an eternal utopia filled with everyone we've ever known and or virgins, see religion, one thing we all feared was death. And although we never quite succeeded in conquering the Grim Reaper, we did manage to confuse and delay him, allowing many of us to enjoy up to 20 extra years.
Nailed it. Vaccines.
We used to die of diseases spread by microorganisms jealous of our size and good looks. But all that changed with the development of the life-saving injections known as vaccines. Their secret ingredient? A little bit of the deadly microbe itself. Yes, it turned out that the same hair of the dog approach that cured hangovers also worked on polio and rubella. Vaccines saved countless lives. Although try explaining that to a sobbing 2-year-old being pierced by a syringe.
Spotlight on holistic medicine.
Believers in holistic medicine rejected Western medical approaches in favor of time-honored spiritual wellness practices. Unless the accident was bad, in which case they let a Western ambulance race them to a Western emergency room where a Western doctor could reset their pelvis, and they could get back to their healing yogic rituals.
Medical bureaucracy.
As a society, we believed that only one thing was more important than caring for our sick and injured, ensuring that they first filled out the proper paperwork. Medical bureaucracy was so important to us that nations sometimes spent more money maintaining them than it would have cost to provide health care for all of its uninsured citizens. This hilarious irony was often lost on the desperately ill.
Psychology.
The human brain was the most complex, powerful, and mysterious organ on Earth. Even at the zenith of our scientific knowledge, the field of psychology could only scratch the surface of the brain's incomparable brilliance. But take that opinion with a grain of salt, because the organ we used to study the brain was, in fact, the brain. That built-in conflict of interest cast doubt onto the entire field of brain-related study. It meant that either this gray orb of protein was a beautiful hive of transmagical powers utilized to only 10% of its capacity, or it was just another narcissistic asshole.
Sigmund Freud, the Wizard of Id.
As the founder of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud hypothesized that doctor-patient dialogue could improve mental health and free up deep-seated resentments he assumed everyone harbored, having spent his entire childhood being called sissy-mooned homo. Freud insisted the psyche of every human ever born could be boiled down to 3 basic parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. A claim so ambitious that merely suggesting it proved the existence of the latter. In his book, The Interpretation of Dreams, Freud asserted that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, and that any pantsless hitchhikers you encountered while on that road were only there because of your daddy issues. He also advocated prescribing cocaine to treat mental illness, which may explain why many of Freud's friends and family members became increasingly dependent on his services, especially on weekends. But Freud was perhaps best remembered for his assertion that both males and females had a subconscious obsession with phalluses, causing them to see the male sex organ practically everywhere they looked. Critics, however, disputed this, saying you gotta be a pretty sick individual to see dicks all over the place.
Pseudoscience.
Of course, science and religion could never provide all the answers we humans were seeking. To help fill in the gaps, we came up with pseudoscience. We developed entire industries that promised relief from all forms of physical and emotional anguish through the simple use of herbs, stretching and or pressing on certain parts of one's feet. And it totally worked. Like, this friend of ours had inoperable brain cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months to live, so he went to see this guy in Chinatown who told him it was actually a clogged meridian or something. Anyway, the guy massaged his armpit for 10 minutes and told him to start living again. Dude, that was 12 years ago. We shit you not.
Weaponry.
As much progress as science made to keep us alive, it was also constantly overshadowed by our new scientific ways of killing each other. When we first unlocked the power of the atom, we could have used it for anything. Free electrical power to help the poor, space travel, medical breakthroughs. Instead, our first move was to build a bomb that could etch permanent shadows on the sidewalk. The goal was to create a weapon where one man could simultaneously kill every other person, making him the winner. And so it was for millennia. Every time we made a discovery, our first order of business was deciding how it could best be used to extinguish the lives of those who hadn't thought of it yet. We never figured out solar-powered cars, but if you're in the market for some space laser-guided nuclear rocket bombs...
FAQs. Future alien questions.
Were scientists the most esteemed members of your civilization?
Absolutely. The only people more renowned than scientists were actors, musicians, athletes, politicians, game show hosts, heiresses, religious leaders, cartoonists, plumbers, serial killers, celebrity chefs, and women who looked good in swimsuits.
What was the highest reward for a scientist's lifetime of dedication to human knowledge?
To be feted by Scandinavians as they received their Nobel Prize. This was an annual award given to our greatest scientists, our most inspiring peacemakers, and our most ethnically diverse authors. It came with a large cash prize, a handsome medal, and a moment of fame so infinitesimally brief could only be measured by fellow scientists.
What are your biggest regrets in terms of a scientific discovery or breakthrough you failed to make?
Jetpack, und jetpack. Jetpack was 1 through 4. 5, maybe cure for cancer. And then coming in at number 6 again. Jetpack!
How did scientists handle the weighty moral responsibilities implicit in their work?
By subcontracting it to a special group of people known as ethicists. Ethicists spent their time agonizing over, writing papers about, and attending conferences dedicated to the moral implications of fields like cloning, stem cell research, and psychopharmacology. This allowed their colleagues to continue their research work unencumbered by concerns like evil and unfairness and widespread loss of human life.
Did you ever discover the wormholes in space that make interstellar travel quick and easy?
Wait, what?
Never mind. It seems like there were far more male scientists than female.
Until very late in our history, women were discouraged from scientific pursuits because the blood in the brains of the men working with them would be diverted to their constantly throbbing erections. What little male brain power was left would be used in the employment of microscopes, test tubes, and other lab equipment to hide these erections.
Man, you people were horny.
Yeah. It's shameful.
Your technology suggests a deep understanding of mathematics, yet many of your larger buildings appear to be missing a 13th floor.
Well, see, that's because while every other number is an abstract mathematical quantity, 13 was a hideous demon integer. You know, we avoided it not only in the numbering of floors, but in any calculations involved in the construction of a building. Ironically, the resulting engineering errors killed exactly 13 million people. Coincidence? Yes.
If you knew some of your technological advances were coming at the expense of your environment, why did you implement them?
Simple cost-benefit analysis. We enjoyed drinking hot coffee in a cold room in the middle of the summer more than we enjoyed other animals being alive.
Chapter 9. Culture.
Human culture arose as we conquered the basics of survival, because once we no longer had to struggle, we almost immediately grew bored. So we spent a huge amount of time creating entertaining distractions to be enjoyed in our newfound downtime. Early culture revolved around storytelling, typically focused on real-life adventures. But we quickly expanded our cultural arsenal. We created music and dance and celebrities, and then combined all three into one powerhouse network show. We devised games and ways to lose money on them. We crafted figurines of things we admired, such as mythical animals and untenably large-breasted women. We juggled and joked, performed feats of strength, and wrote. We castrated young boy singers and fed Christians to lions. The last two were really just fads. We weren't total psychos. Across time and in every land, our societies drew on and were influenced by their predecessors to create their own distinct styles of art, dress, and intoxicants. In short, their own culture. Fortunately, in modern times, globalization allowed this great cultural variety to be efficiently winnowed down to everyone on the planet watching the same police procedural dramas while eating franchise delivery pizza. Yet ultimately, culture's most personal effect was that it made us actually feel things. Great joy from comedy, deep sadness from drama or reality dating shows, or more complex emotions like when we'd hear that song Summer Breeze, which we hated but through unfortunate happenstance was playing when we lost our virginity. The point is, culture not only helped our days go faster, it tapped into our emotional cores. Yes, the artifacts you find in our civilization's wreckage will show you how we lived. But if you want to know how we felt about how we lived, how we interpreted our existence, you must look to our culture. This was our record of what made us distinctly human. For ours was a complicated existence, filled with great achievements, enormous compassion, inexplicable violence, and myriad contradicting actions. But for all our differences, none of us, white, black, Jew, Muslim, gay, or straight, none of us could get all the way through Brian's song without crying like babies.
Entertainment.
One of the best ways to relax after our daily struggles to obtain food, clothing, shelter, and a mate was to watch simulations of others engaging in those same struggles. Entertainment sometimes drew us together by giving us a pretext to socialize with each other, but in a larger sense, it served to keep us apart by immersing us so thoroughly in fantasy that it seemed more fun to just stay in. Without entertainment, life would have been merely a series of self-generated epiphanies leading to greater personal understanding. No wonder we preferred juggling.
Comedy and tragedy.
The two most basic modes of storytelling were comedy and tragedy. Tragedy allowed an audience to feel a character's pain. Comedy allowed an audience to heartily enjoy a character's pain. Both modes originated in ancient Greece, in plays featuring protagonists and antagonists, along with a large chorus so the less talented kids could participate.
The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet.
What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
What if it were called assflower?
Yea, though it be called assflower, yet it would still smell as sweet.
What if it were called cock of the dog?
Yea, though it be called cock of the dog, it needs not smell like one.
What if it were called the bishop's filthy rectum?
Dost thou have many more of these to go through?
Books.
Books are the permanent repository of all mankind's knowledge and wisdom, a painstakingly detailed record of our entire existence. Please feel free to thumb through them, although chances are you're going to want to wait for the movie.
Music.
If you came across the golden record on your journey here, then you've already discovered music, perhaps our most joyous form of expression. Music blended voices and instruments and glorious melodies, harmonies and rhythms that could evoke any emotion. We played music at funerals, weddings, and parties. We had concerts where we all got together just to listen to music. We developed incredibly sophisticated devices so that no matter where we went, we could have music in our cars or at the gym, or if we were somewhere where someone else was listening to music that we didn't really like, we could still listen to our music. Music was really cool until it got too popular, and then it was some serious sellout bullshit.
Film.
Moving pictures were an incredibly sophisticated technology that allowed man to recreate and project all the sights and sounds of real life only with better-looking people. Film, or movies to those not attending a Campus Godard retrospective, combined theater's emotional immediacy with photography's spectacular realism and sound's remarkable hearitude in a complete sensory experience. In later years, film added nudity and explosions. For the kids.
Television.
If going to the movies was like worshiping in a cathedral, then watching television was like masturbating in a confessional. No wonder that from the outset, TV, we called it that after it rendered us too lazy to use four-syllable words, felt so sinfully good. A flip of the switch, and we were sucked into a smaller-than-life world controlled by unseen forces. The existential crises filling our brains were instantly soothed, and the burden of free will lightened and crystallized into the simple dilemma of whether or not to change channels. As for the programming, there was a hard and fast rule. The total amount of quality television at any one time was a constant. Thus, as what were once a mere 3 channels evolved into 400. Well, you do the math. What did we like to watch on television? Well, the short answer, anything. But there were certain kinds of shows we were particularly drawn to.
Sitcom.
Allowed us to spend half an hour in the company of 4 stock characters: smarty, dummy, crazy, and grouchy.
Western.
Fulfilled our lust for casual murder without offending our puritanical moral sensibilities.
Late night talk show.
Because there was no more relaxing way to drift off to sleep than hearing Kate Hudson relate an anecdote about Matthew McConaughey's mischievous on-set antics.
Medical drama.
TV doctors focused entirely on the life and death and yelling aspects of their work, and rarely on the cleaning bedpans and analyzing urine part.
Legal drama.
Immersed viewers in a world where good usually triumphed over evil. Frequently aired in marathons, which were in every way the opposite of real marathons.
Cable news.
Thanks to technology, it was possible to keep people well informed about important world events 24 hours a day with accurate, impartial, in-depth journalism. We didn't do it, but it was possible.
Artists.
At the center of our cultural endeavors was a small subset of people called artists. Seemingly endowed with heightened sensitivity to the world around them, artists felt and expressed the terrible beauty of our fleeting existence. The rest of us had jobs.
Culture, high and low.
With so much culture, we needed a way to sort it all out. One way was placing each bit of cultural output on a spectrum of social status to ascertain its significance. High culture aspired to fulfill humanity's greatest intellectual, aesthetic, or spiritual potential. Middle culture had less lofty aspirations, but was more accessible to those with less education. Low culture focused on sex, excrement, and instant gratification, and was what we mostly spent our time on.
Sports.
Exerting oneself for no apparent reason was called exercise. Exerting oneself with the goal of victory was called sports. Sports were an exciting and intense way for members of a society to put on uniforms and go at each other in a nearly deathless way. It is not possible to overestimate the importance that this war substitute had in our society. While few of us ever got to play them professionally, tens of thousands of us would gather in cavernous stadia to witness our favorite teams score, or, in the case of soccer, not score. Millions more would watch on television, confident in the one simple truth of sport: those players and spectators who did not share the enthusiasm you had for your team sucked. A handful of us, through hard work and God-given height, were good enough at these war games to do them professionally. We called these giants among men athletes. They were better than us at all things, until they too got old, bald, and fat.
In the ruins. Gyms.
Throughout the remains of the developed world, you will find facilities filled with what appear to be torture devices. These were gyms, places where we went to engage in the kind of grueling and tedious physical exertion our ancestors would have killed their eldest children to be free of. If you want to use the equipment, feel free to do so, but make sure another alien is there to spot you. And wipe the bench.
Leisure.
When not sitting back being passively entertained, we often engaged in more active, equally useless pursuits known as leisure activities. Once, leisure was a luxury enjoyed only by infants and aristocrats who used it to fulfill their very busy napping and vomiting schedules, respectively. But social progress eventually brought periods of leisure to nearly everyone. The activities that filled this time generally took one of three forms: those serving zero practical purposes, games, sports; those mimicking useful pursuits at which previous generations had toiled for their livelihoods but which we connived to find relaxing, carpentry, fishing; and those that were out-and-out self-destructive, gambling, recreational drugs. But all succeeded in filling the yawning gap between the previous thing we had to do and the next thing.
In the ruins. Video games.
The boxy machines attached to many of our televisions were used to play video games, interactive, graphically rich worlds where we could act out our dreams of being professional athletes, Italian plumbers, mutant hedgehogs, and psychopaths who beat hookers to death. By 2010, video games were the most profitable form of entertainment in the world. But, and this is where it may get a little awkward, many of the most popular games had a recurring theme: locating, defending ourselves from, and destroying you.
Gambling.
Gambling was the attempt to win money by achieving success in a game whose probability-based rules were explicitly designed to thwart that very outcome. Now, to the uninitiated, this sounds like the stupidest thing any rational creature could possibly do. But the goal was not merely financial gain. There was a thrill involved in risking one's wages, house, and wife on the turn of a card, the roll of a die, or the speed of a hungry greyhound. Yes, gamblers generally lost their money, but they deemed it a small price to pay for the thrill of almost not losing their money.
In the ruins. Las Vegas.
Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. Place your bets.
Right in the middle of a vast desert wasteland, you will find a concentrated man-made wasteland. This is Las Vegas. Also known as Sin City, it was a place built by gangsters where at 4 a.m, you could sit on furniture made of live naked ladies while eating a $1.99 prime rib dinner and watching a tiger fuck a penguin. It was also a very popular place to get married.
Pornography.
So, you have probably found some items of entertainment that seem to feature mainly naked people in the act of copulation. If you haven't found these items yet, we suggest looking beneath our mattresses, in the backs of our locked drawers, and in our bedroom closets behind the sweaters. These were a special kind of entertainment known as pornography, which was designed to provide its viewers with a vicarious sense of what it might be like to have vigorously mechanical sexual intercourse with a grim, sad-eyed partner. But it wasn't very popular. Not at all.
Dear Penthouse Forum, I never thought this would happen to me. The other day I was home, alone, reading Penthouse Forum, when I found myself rather aroused. Imagine my surprise when I felt something grip my slightly below average size erect penis. It was my hand, covered in a lubricant I kept next to my bed. You again, I said.
Escape. Alcohol and drugs.
Because we like being happy, we often ingested substances that altered our biochemistry to pleasurable effect. The only problem was that when these drugs wore off, we were even sadder than before. Luckily, there was a cure. More drugs. Every culture had acceptable drugs and unacceptable drugs. This had nothing to do with their danger or potency. A bottle of vodka, widely accepted, was arguably more lethal than a hit of ecstasy, widely deplored. We didn't do certain drugs simply because we didn't do them. And if you needed more explanation than that, everyone from the president to the local PTA was happy to see you die in jail.
Alcohol.
Alcohol was the undisputed king of intoxicants, more popular than all other drugs combined, expressly permitted by every major culture except one, and That one really could have used a few drinks to take the edge off. Alcohol lowered our social inhibitions, came in a variety of flavors from well-rounded to painful burning, and greatly reduced the memory of the hurt and damage caused by excessive drinking. In fact, it was so popular, the few people who didn't want to do it anymore remained anonymous, so as not to embarrass themselves.
Drugs.
The use of recreational drugs could be very pleasurable, but all too often it could evolve into a crippling addiction. Luckily, we as a species were strong-willed enough to be able to do drugs as often as we liked without having a problem because we could stop whenever we wanted, and it wasn't controlling us. Having said that, could we borrow $20? Come on, man, don't be a dick.
Fashion.
Humans were constantly transforming the basic necessities of life into forms of artistic and cultural expression. Food became cuisine, shelter became architecture, and water became the enchanted forest water safari featuring the world's wildest lazy river. The epitome of this phenomenon was fashion, which transformed clothing into a way of expressing our authentic inner selves, at least for a couple of months until our authentic inner selves were out. Some argued this was a superficial endeavor reflecting nothing more than our endless capacity for vanity. We refer to those people as frumpy.
FAQs. Future alien questions.
First of all, humanity, we are big fans of your work.
Well, thank you, future aliens. It's very kind of you to say.
Especially some of your earlier stuff.
No, all right.
Let's start at the beginning. How did cave paintings come about?
Hey, you're making us feel old. Well, one day we returned from a great day of hunting, and Og told a joke about it, and Grok didn't laugh, and Og said you kind of had to be there, and Ook had some leftover berries, I think from Cave Cobbler, and he said, you know what, we could show what happened by means of an abstract representation of the event that we, for lack of a better word, paint right here in our cave walls, which, if you knew him, was so Ook.
That leads us to process. Where did you get your ideas?
Well, sometimes from something we observed in our lives. But more often, we were inspired by seeing someone else's idea that worked, and then tweaking it just enough so that we couldn't get sued. And then if we did get sued, we'd just say, like, oh, that was an homage.
You worked in so many different styles. You were constantly evolving.
Well, thank you. The way that usually worked was one of us would see the world in a new way, and then the rest of us would laugh at that one person, and then he would die unappreciated. And everyone else would imitate him and pretend they were fans of his the whole time.
You also tackled so many different media. Visual arts, literature, music, the dance. Is there one you enjoyed working in the most?
Yeah, at the end, ringtones. There's something about the inherent parameters of the form that's oddly freeing. Crazy Frog would never have worked as, say, an opera or a novel, but as a ringtone, it was sublime.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but I'm duty-bound to ask. The Middle Ages, what happened to your work? You seemed to forget everything you knew.
Yeah, that was kind of an intense millennium for us. We took the fall of Rome pretty hard, and we weren't taking very good care of ourselves at that time. That wasn't our best work.
You're talking about the plague.
We don't want to get into it, is it?
Last question. As you look back on 50,000 years of artistic genius, do you have any regrets?
None. Well, maybe Triumph of the Will. Jeremy Piven.
Thank you, humanity. I'm afraid your time is up.
Oh, we know. So that's it. You now know everything about Earth, life, and the human race. Of course, little light reading isn't the same as life experience. After finishing this audiobook, you may find yourselves even more disappointed to have arrived too late to meet us. Well, you're in luck. If you re-listen to the 2-hour human readers, you'll find detailed information about 2 locations where you can find thousands of samples of our DNA, human DNA, much of it from the coveted 1834 demographic. And if you're as advanced as we think you are, you're going to have no problem converting these molecular scraps into fully functioning human clones to do with as you please. Now, as you'll see from the forms accompanying the samples, we tried to anticipate your every possible need. After all, if you choose to reconstitute us, it would be well within your rights to use our future avatars any way you see fit. Frankly, the bastards should be grateful just to be alive. If they aren't, feel free to use your laser whips on them, if you have laser whips. But to be honest, slave labor might not be the best use of our genetic material. Colonization is all well and good. Believe us, we did more than our share. But as you sit, hover, pulsate, listening to this, consider another possibility. Bringing us back not to work for you, but with you, to reach the full potential that we never quite achieved on our own. We had so much to offer the cosmos. We were curious, intelligent, creative. As individuals, most of us were compassionate beings capable of both routine and extraordinary acts of nobility and bravery and love. As a group, we were usually able to live together in some semblance of civility, not only refraining from hurting each other, but coming together in times of crisis. We wrote incredible theater. We built the pyramids. We invented democracy. We sent men to the moon, and we patiently waited in line for half an hour at the supermarket without strangling or even cutting in front of that crazy old lady trying to buy 15 bags of cat food with a traveler's check. Yes, in the end, we were unable to rein in our worst impulses. But perhaps with the aid of an outside party, a superior and benevolent race like yourselves, we could overcome the baser aspects of our nature and together give this planet the kind of caretakers it deserves. Whatever you choose, we appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit about who we were. And good luck here in your new home. We hope she's as good to you as she was to us. Oh, and watch out for Kilauea. It leaks.
This has been an Ashet audio production of Earth, the audiobook. Written and edited by Jon Stewart, David Javerbaum, Rory Albanese, Steve Bodo, Josh Lieb. Writers: Kevin Blyer, Rich Blomquist, Tim Carvel, Wyatt Senak, Hallie Haglund, J.R. Havlin, Elliot Kalin, Sam Means, Joe Miller, John Oliver, Daniel Radosh, Jason Ross. Featuring Sigourney Weaver. Read by Jon Stewart, Samantha B., Wyatt Senak, Jason Jones, and John Oliver. With additional narration by Robert Petkoff. Adapted by John McElroy. Executive producer, Michelle McGonigal. Produced by John McElroy, Jon Stewart, Rory Albanese, Steve Bodo, David Javerbaum, and Josh Lieb. Directed by John McElroy. Engineered by Tim Lester, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and Charles de Montebello, CDM Studios, NYC. Post-production by Charles de Montebello, CDM Studios, NYC. Production coordinators Jill Baum, Jocelyn Kahn, Jill Katz, and Jennifer Flans. Special thanks to Hillary Kuhn. Earth, the book, is available in print from Grand Central Publishing, a division of Ashet Book Group. Text copyright 2010 by Busboy Productions, Inc. Audio production copyright 2010, Ashet Audio, all rights reserved. Except as permitted under the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, no part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, or stored in a database or retrieval system without the written permission of the publisher. This audiobook is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.